Internet, what is up? Happy Monday, people. This next episode of the podcast has been brought to you by Combat Flip Flops. Combat Flip Flops, be a better human. And definitely business before bullets. If you're not familiar with Combat Flip Flops, they make the most amazing flip flops on the planet. And yes, I'm obligated to say that because my best friend, who's a former Army Ranger, owns the company. But even though I'm obligated to say that, he really does make amazing flip flops and a bunch of other really cool gear. He makes chamas. He makes these really cool little claymore bags that you can basically use for satchel. Fellas, don't get upset by that. And Indiana Jones had a satchel, okay? So check out Combat Flip Flops. They got a bunch of cool stuff. www.combatflipflops.com or check them out on the gram, Combat Flip Flops. All right. We're getting ready to dive into episode 62 with a special guest who I randomly found through the internet, and we talk about that. I found him through Instagram, and he was gracious enough to come on the show. His name is Doron Keidar, and hopefully I pronounced that correctly. If not, he's free to message me and tell me I can't speak in a Jewish accent very well. But he is a member of the Israeli IDF, and also, I think, hails from Texas as well. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoy this episode of the podcast because we talk and dive in depth into the current debacle that is going on in Israel with regard to the attacks that were perpetrated by Hamas on October 7th and the Israeli response to those attacks and the current military campaign that's been going on in Gaza. So he provides a great firsthand account. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode of the podcast as we dive in to episode 62. Enjoy. Things are getting tougher when you can't get the top off the bottom of the barrel. Wide open, roar my future now. Looking fucking new. I know that I don't know. I know that I don't know nothing. I know that I don't know. I know that I don't know. Okay, we're live. Awesome. Well, I wanted to take the opportunity to thank you for coming on the podcast, and I will have you, go ahead and introduce yourself because I don't think I'm capable of I'd have to practice on how to properly pronounce your name. So as you said earlier, when we were talking before we hit the record button, I speak American, so I could give it a crack, but I'll have you go ahead and introduce yourself and talk about yourself a bit.
So basically, my name is Doron Keidar, born and raised here in Israel. Um, the reason why I even ended up in Israel was because my parents are originally from the United States. My dad was a World War II vet, so he fought World War II. He was a Christian Zionist. He heard that Jews were being butchered in Germany. And at the age of 15, he lied about his age and ended up joining the Navy. And that's where he learned electrical engineering because at the age of 15, you don't finish high school. And so that's where he learned his occupation in life when he got out of the war. And a good friend of his from the war says, hey, there's this project in Israel. They just had a war. It's the 6-Day War. Israel had regained land that was lost in the 48 war. But we also gained a whole swath of land with Egypt, bordering us in Egypt, which is known as the Sinai Desert. And so essentially that land got taken by Israel, and it gave us a huge buffer between Egypt and Israel. And essentially the United States came in and negotiated a deal for the Egyptians because they were basically humiliated. At the time it was Nasser, King Nasser was King President Nasser. He was ruling like a tyrant, I guess you could say, like many of the Arab nations around us. And he was very humiliated because he did the most trash talk out of the Arab nations that were trying to take out Israel. And let's just say he had a lot of humble pie to eat. And so long story short, the United States brokered the deal on his behalf. Of course, he never made any how would you say, any negotiation or sitting down with the nation of Israel. They just handed it back. That, we won that back. Like they gave it back to us, kind of deal. And so long story short, that brokering of that deal has created a defense budget for the state of Israel and Egypt ever since, where the United States essentially gives something like $2 billion a year, I believe it is, or 4 billion maybe, I forget the exact numbers. Egypt gets to build their military and expand it every year. Israel gets to build cool toys for the Americans to sell on the international market with allies of the United States, etc. And so essentially, in other words, our defense deal, which I think a lot of people are kind of ignorant to, and I know there's a lot of people that say that we need to stop giving money to Israel, they're actually referring to that peace deal that America brokered back then. And essentially, we don't really get the money. We get money allotted into defense projects that we do together with the United States, one of them being actually the Iron Dome. So thankfully, we get to use that technology and in our own defense in some cases. But really, in reality, we don't get to become rich off of the technology that we kind of produce a lot of, because a lot of the brainchild of it comes from our engineers and what have you. So in any case, I'm fast forwarding to today, but that was the deal that was brokered, and that's what brought my father and my family to Israel. And essentially, I got born and raised in the land of Israel. And years later, my wife and I went through Jewish conversion, and so that's why I have also a Hebraized name. That's the skinny of how I ended up being born and raised here, and why I ended up with this funny accent, and not like in a typical Israeli accent, Israeli who comes and born here, and and you can't understand half of what I'm saying.
It's good that you can turn it on and turn it off.
Yeah,
you can probably blend in better.
I just think of my friends, So it actually helps with my security work today. I do executive protection outside of the military service. I've been doing that for many years, and so it's kind of funny because I get to use my American persona with a lot of the work that I do. I'm not going to give away some of what I do, but essentially it works for my advantage to blend in with the group that I'm with and look like a dumb American, so to speak, and put myself in positions where I can basically throw off any any attacks on my group, or if I had a very Jewish persona, it actually would draw an attack on the group. So a lot of things like that that I get to use for my advantage in the work that I do on the day-to-day work here in Israel.
Yeah, the field craft is definitely a thing. So I gotcha. I'm picking up what you're putting down. Awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to come on the podcast and discuss this. And for the audience, like how we met, I'm just going to go through the story. That we kind of discussed earlier was there was a video that went up, and it was kind of viral, at least in the circle at least in the content that I pay attention to. It was viral, and it was a IDF soldier that was caught in a really bad situation by himself, and just fought through it like a tiger. Pushed in, killed a dude at the doorway. His buddy came around the corner, threw a grenade. He backed off, still ate the grenade. Concussion knocked him down, I think, knocked his gun out of his hand. He jumped back up, grabbed his gun, and then pushed back to the door, pushed inside, cut the angle, killed the second guy that threw the grenade. And then I think that's where the video, cut off, but he ended up penetrating a couple more rooms deep and killing a third guy, from what I understand. And then he, I think he got wounded, but he's evacuated and he's recovering. So survived a 3-on-1. I posted that video up. The reason I posted that video is because I'm, as a Fallujah vet, and seeing this like close in urban fighting, that's exactly what we were up against in Fallujah in 2004 for, we didn't, fortunately go at it as long as you guys have been going at it, but we were, eyeball to eyeball with bad guys for 8 weeks straight, I think. So, and especially the really brutal hard fighting was the first 4 weeks, before it finally started dying down to a reasonable and controllable, momentum. But, yeah, seeing all of that, since I've been following these, since the attack since it popped off it was October 7th, if I'm not mistaken, correct? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I've been following it since it happened, and since things, boiled over and the attack occurred, I've been tracking things really closely. So, I reposted it and kind of put some lessons learned in there and just like reinforced like, hey, this is the reality of combat at close range. and, some of the stuff that I'd learned and some of the stuff that he actually executed, being, aggressive. And that's what usually wins the day, is the people that are like, have some tactical patience and know when to like push the gas pedal and be really aggressive, and that violence of action and how it like will win the day at very close ranges. And somebody said, "Oh, I got that video from this page and it was your page." And so I went onto your page and I looked at everything, and I really liked what you were talking about, and I liked your page a lot. There's some good photography on there too. And so I was like, "Oh wow,
Thank you.
I like this guy's page. I'm going to follow him." So I did, and then you put up a post basically talking about how you think more people should be more vocal in supporting what you guys are doing, especially from the veteran community. And I've been very vocal about it and have told a lot of people, and I've podcasted about it a few times in regard to the situation and my feelings on it. So yeah, so then I reached out to you as soon as I saw that video, and I said, "Hey man, you want to come on the podcast?" And here we are. So I really appreciate you taking the time and accepting my invitation, because I think it's really important to have this long form conversation to where people can understand a little bit more of the reality and that's going on the ground. And not only that, but the geopolitical situation with regard to politics and culture. It's super important, because those are the big things that are driving what's going on. And a lot of people are that have these strong opinions of like, "Oh, Israel's been too heavy handed." Well, my opinion in that is fuck off. Like, you don't have Katyusha rockets falling out of the sky onto your schools and onto your kids like every day. So like, you reserve those opinions if you don't understand the exact reality of living in a conflict zone 24/7. So
Yeah.
I'm happy, super stoked that you're here so that we can have this conversation.
Well, I'm really happy too. I appreciate it when people like you have a platform. You're in the community that I see myself a part of. It doesn't matter that you wear the U.S. flag on your shoulder. I wear the Israeli flag on mine. In my case, I kind of wear both flags.
Right.
I even wear the Texas flag,
Nice.
by the way, representing Texas. That's my that's essentially where I'm registered right now. But in any case, if you're in the community of warriors, we know warriors from all over the world, right? Defenders. We like to share knowledge. I'm in the shooting tactical world, military defense, executive protection. So it's like it all kind of meshes, and we all can learn a lot from each other. And for me, that's a very important community, because there's a lot that we can glean from, learn from. While you were fighting in Fallujah, I was fighting. That's what, now 20 years ago, right? I was actually fighting in Gaza before the pullout.
Oh wow.
And so yeah. So I remember I would read newspapers, and I'd see how you guys were doing, and it would really hurt me when I'd see U.S. soldiers getting killed or wounded. Some really memorable moments for me during those years. And in any case, so for me, it's like it's one of the same. And in a way, that's also kind of how I was voicing my frustration, because there's a lot of people I respect, there's a lot of people I look up to, and I follow them. And I've seen on an unfortunate high number of these people an absolute silence on their platforms about what's happening here. And for me, the ones that hurt the most, because you know what, if you're a secular guy and all you care about is guns and whatever, knock yourself out. But when you call yourself a Bible believing Christian, and that you think that that's your life, and you want to share your faith on your platform, then it's like, okay, but you do realize that Israel is where you get your faith from, and the people of Israel that are being attacked right now, and not to speak up for the people that you call your Messiah, as your Messiah, that and his people are being butchered right now, and not to say anything. What I mean? Because for me, it's simple. It's like, what if Jesus was here right now? And, would you be silent in his presence? Would you just you'd be talking with him guns and this and that, here October 7th, a month in, 2 months in, 4 months in, and you're absolutely silent, not one conversation with him about, this really hurts me. I'm really sad that this is happening. You would obviously have that conversation, I'd imagine. And so what I've learned is from those people, um, the ones that have been silent, it's because they're afraid, in my opinion, they're afraid that their platform is going to get attacked, that they're going to lose followers. And the bottom line is you care more about that than you care about your faith, that you care about your values. Because if this is a real actual value to you, then you're obviously going to say something about it. Just like on my platform, if you go on my page, I talk about human trafficking, and I am actively involved in helping, fight that. I am again, there's a bunch of different things, this whole, uh, he, she, whatever agenda to remove, roles and whatever. So it's like, I'll be talking about these things that are on the social media platform people are talking about. And I really don't care if you're going to follow me or you're not going to follow me, depending on what side of the coin I choose, right? It's like, well, this is my opinion. And if you're not brave enough to stand for what you believe for, um, yeah, it's sad because I know you guys fought for your values and you're fighting for them on your platform, but obviously this isn't important of enough of a value for you to fight for and to say something about. And for me, that personally hurts because I know you can fight for it. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
Especially War to Warrior. I know you have the fight. You went and you laid your life down for your country and for those values you cherish. Well, obviously our values aren't that important to you. Hey, and you know what? There's not an Israel for you to visit. If you're, again, like more in the Christian world is kind of where I take most of my criticism towards. It's like, if you're a Bible believing Christian, there's no Israel to visit. Welcome to Palestine.
Right.
Welcome to Terraceville. Welcome to Abu, whatever, tours of, Al-Quds, not Jerusalem, Al-Quds.
Yeah. And they'll tear down they'll tear down the monuments and they'll build mosques on them. So just if that were to happen. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's been heavily
yeah.
contested for a long time, and I completely agree with you. Like, you won't have to worry about me. Like, I'm very outspoken. I'm like notoriously outspoken on my platform. I've been canceled twice. Like, I got deleted at 10,000 followers during COVID because of, what I was saying about COVID at the time, that actually now in hindsight has
Oh,
turned out the things that I was saying were actually true and proven by real science, not the fake bullshit science that everybody was spouting off at the time.
yeah,
Yeah, I've been canceled. So like, I pride myself on authenticity and being very authentic. And my thing is like, if I will meet you where you're at, and if we can have a great dialogue and have a good civil exchange on social media, I'm happy to do that. You bring if I say something you disagree with, bring your sources to the table, and let's have a reasonable dialogue about it. And I've done that on many occasions, and there's been a few occasions where I've been proven wrong, and I was happy to admit that and say, okay, you're right. I, I I agree with what you're saying now because of how you articulated it, and the reasonable and credible sources that you've brought to the table. People that want to always bring, I have a few listeners that will always bring like, the most ridiculous like source. They'll bring mainstream media sources to the table and quote means mainstream media all the time. I'm like, no, that's not a source. Don't don't come.
CNN's not a
Correct. Yeah.
source.
Don't be sitting here quoting Rachel Maddow to me about like, the situation in Israel. So yeah, I
Yeah,
agree with you. I think that, yeah, people are really, really concerned about their platforms. I don't care. Like, I don't give a shit about, Meta, Facebook, whatever the fuck they call themselves these days, Instagram. Like, I'll just continue to restart a page, and I'll just keep coming back. Like, you delete my page, cool. I'll restart another one and another one and another one, and they'll be like Lone Element like 5.0 at some point. But I'm going to continue to be authentic, continue to put
yeah,
out things that I feel are relevant and things that I'm passionate about. And watching what was
yeah,
going on over there, like, I agree with you. I think there's some definite hypocrisy involved, and how things are being portrayed and how things are being handled by the mainstream media. I just talked about this on a podcast the other day about how disgusted I am by our administration that our president will, go sit down and meet with the King of Jordan, and then at the same time, like, ask for large chunks of money to be donated to Israel so that you guys can be properly supplied and equipped to go fight this, threat that you guys are dealing with over there, which I support.
Hmm.
because I know how disgusting that threat is that you guys are dealing with, because I dealt with it in, Iraq, Afghanistan, over 9 deployments, and I know intimately the ideology behind it and the brutality and the tactics that are employed by that enemy. And so I'm in full support of, helping you guys keep that threat in its box, because it's extremely toxic, and it will, and to be clear, like, I'm not saying Palestinian people are toxic. I'm saying that Hamas is toxic. I'm saying that these fundamentalist terrorist organizations are extremely toxic, and they are a cancer. And if you don't snuff it out, it will continue to proliferate and spread and spread and spread to a point. Like, the unfortunate thing about what happened on October 7th is very much like what happened on September 11th, 2001. Like, there is no live and let live with this enemy. There is no negotiating with them. There is no peace talks. If you try and have peace talks with them, they're only having a peace talk with you so that they can manipulate the situation to buy time, to come up with a different plan, come up with a different strategy, rearm, re-equip. And that's what I've experienced during my time, is like, they only will sit down at the table if they think that they can manipulate you into buying time to put themselves in a better position so that they can then come back stronger and continue the fight. So, I support what you, yeah, I
100%.
support what you guys are doing. And
Yeah.
I've been very vocal about that on my platform. I'm like, once again, the people that are like, and the thing that really makes me laugh too is when they're like, "Oh, it's a genocide." I'm like, "No, like, you're actually talking about people that have really experienced a real genocide. Like, they're not there to
Yeah.
wipe out the Palestinian people. They're there to um, deal with an enemy, and a clear and present danger to their way of life and their national security, which is Hamas and Hezbollah and all of the other little
Yeah.
terror groups that love to come and, murder, rape, and destroy, what you guys built. So, like, it's not, it's just, it's the way it is, and when our president's like, "Oh, well," and he's standing up there, and I'm not a fan of the guy. I think he's pretty much the biggest piece of shit, and he's the worst president that we've ever had in the history of our country. I think that he's completely medically unfit for duty as well. And for him to stand up there and be like, "Yeah, I think that Israel's been too heavy-handed and they've gone over the top." No, fuck that. There's no going over the top with this enemy. And if you don't understand that, then I invite anybody to go to those countries, and not just Israel, but like, go to the deep dark places in, the Sudan, go to the deep dark places in Yemen and in Afghanistan and in Iraq and in all of the places where there's a very, very strong, deadly, in Syria. Like, go sit down and try and have some negotiations with ISIS and see how that goes. Come back, if you live, come back and tell me how
Exactly.
that went for you.
Yeah. And ironically, the people who are so vocal for, you know, free Palestine, um, this is, genocides happening, what have you. Obviously, talk about the Palestinians because the Jewish blood that was spilt on October 7th, apparently that's not a genocide. Um, Babies mutilated and raped and murdered, burnt alive, that's not genocide. And all because they're Jewish, yeah? Just to be clear. So none of that is a genocide, but when you have a trained military that goes door to door, house to house, that calls you on your cell phone and tells you, get the hell out of there, you're going to die if you stick around, that's a genocide. Literally, we call you. We will call your cell phone, send you a text. And I've seen Palestinians in Gaza on social media getting those calls or getting those texts and filming themselves mocking the Air Force, basically telling F you, I'm not going anywhere, you know? And that's just a sad reality. To me, that's a sad reality that we go through real long, hard war fighting. 4 months in, we're into our fifth month of fighting. And the war that we fight, and again, I'm talking as not as an American who lives in a nice, cozy house in America. To be clear, for whoever's listening, my accent can be confusing, right? I'm born and raised here in Israel. Okay, on the day of October 7th, I put my family in this house into my bomb shelter while under fire, while the alert is going, and I hear booms going over all around me from the rockets that are being fired towards Jerusalem, and took my military gear, which thank God I have it in a go bag and I'm ready to go, like most of the guys in my unit, and just run to the car and hightail to base where we get our orders and we start our missions essentially right on October 7th. So my unit has been in the fight, boots on the ground. Everything that you guys are reading about, that you're commenting about, I've been doing and living. Okay, my family, my friends' families, the whole country. Okay, so I'm not unique either. Let's be clear. Like the whole country has gone to war. Every able-bodied individual that is able to join in the fight is doing it on every different level. If it's radio comms, if it's intel, if it's computers, if it's making sure I have a radio that works when I go on the field, making sure my nods work, or night vision, uh, for the civilians, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, making sure that the Hummers that I'm driving into Gaza and throughout dangerous area doesn't break down, and then I become a target and get eliminated by the enemy. So the whole country, okay, went into battle mode, and there's no war like this that we've ever fought. In fact, this is historically the longest. This is the longest war that we have fought it since 1948. So since the founding of the nation, this is the longest fought battle. It's the worst war that we fought in. It's worse than Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur was a horrible trauma to the state of Israel, and it was right after the 6 Day War where we were on a high, so to speak, and we were kind of untouchable, so to speak. And what happened on October 7th, and what has been happening and is still happening now, is there's nothing like this historically for us, nothing at all. And to say that what we did was genocide and is genocide, to me, that's disgusting, because you're spitting on the blood of the men and women who have died fighting a very careful battle, house to house, room to room, so that we don't kill innocents. And to say that we're genocidal, and like you said, you know what? You're welcome to come on over here and show me how it's done. Please. In fact, every military that I've ever spoken to, I know people from all the spectrum, from every part of the world, okay? Africa, Asia, Europe, United States. And I've not had one conversation with one war fighter, and I'm talking about people who fight in tier 1 units and in Marines or what have you, like your from your lowest rifleman to your most elite units. None of them operate the way we do. And they all tell us, like, guys, we would never do that. We would never do this, and we'd never do this, and we'd never do this. We wouldn't call the bad guy and say we're gonna blow down your place. And so that's reality versus what the media and people with opinions are saying. And I think it's just it's sad. It's sad that they're developing their opinions based off of what, I don't know, Oprah said. Again, not to throw her under the bus as specific.
Oh,
I have
no,
no clue
you
what
can
she
throw
said,
her
but
right under the bus. You can go ahead. It's not going to
but
hurt
just
feelings.
but I mean, like, just like some celebrity, right, said so and so, right, said such and such, and then you take their word for it because they're famous, they're on TV, or it's CNN reporters or BBC or whoever. And then you have people like me that are going to tell you exactly what's happening if you want to listen. And that's exactly why I've created my social platform, because as you know full well, most people in the military world does not share about our experiences. The missions that we do are very they're secret, at least the way we operate, etc. A lot of what I do in the military is not something that's public information. And thank God, because of the way we operate, my unit has had 0 casualties since the beginning of the war, which is like an absolute miracle, to be honest. And so, I mean, we've had guys that were wounded and that kind of thing, but no one was killed during this war. And a lot of that is to do with leadership in my unit that won't take chances, won't jump the gun, won't be a cowboy, but we carefully plan out every mission, and everything is super secret. And here I am uploading pictures online of, you know, what happened afterwards, right? So I take a lot of flack for that, of course, from my community, because they're just like, hey man, I can't believe you posted this or you posted that. But I want people to take an inside look into the hell that we walk into every day, and understand, like, this, we fight a real war. And when you're hearing something from me, then I want you to know it's authentic, it's real. I'm not telling you a story and making stuff up. It's like, look, here's hard proof. I was there. I'm not making this stuff up. So on the one hand, it's that, but it's also to promote my community, that I'm proud of the people that I serve with. I'm proud of, the sacrifices they make. I'm proud of the missions that they carry out. And I wish I could talk about the missions that they carry out. And just to kind of like highlight in a way and be like, look, these guys they're doing something really amazing, and you should be thankful for people like this. You get to sleep at night, wonderful. I'm operating most likely when you're sleeping, and enjoying the nice warmness of your bed and the heater, while I'm out there freezing my butt off, getting rained on, getting cold, riding in an open Humvee, you know, plenty of fun
Yeah,
there, right? Any of you want to join?
I can confirm that that is in fact true, because when I reached out to you, I hit you up on Instagram, and I think you were out you were out on the line and you were working, and you were like,
Yeah,
I was like, hey man, would you be interested in coming on the podcast? And you're like, oh yeah, I got a couple hours off right now. I'm, at the patrol base, like it's 2 a.m. And I was like, holy shit, he wants to podcast right now. He's out on the line. I was like, no, like let's like let you rotate
yeah,
off the line, get home. I mean, I appreciate the enthusiasm. I was like, yeah, he's down to
yeah,
podcast live from the patrol base, on the line. So I was like, okay, cool. Like, no, get home,
yeah,
get a good shower, like be in a
yeah,
safe spot, so to speak, where you can like be not distracted or worry about like, anything bad happening while we're having a conversation. So, but yes, I can confirm that
yeah,
like that is indeed true, that you are in
yeah,
fact doing that, and I appreciate that. And really, realistically, like information operations is a thing. So I
yeah.
think kind of where this I think where what you guys as a country should have done is and you didn't, at least that I didn't see. I think you guys should have been very in everyone's face with the video evidence of what happened on October 7th, because I know I
Mm,
saw just a couple clips, and I'm like, after everything that
yeah,
I've done and been through and seen in real life, like I'm not a war porn whore that loves to watch that. Like I don't want to see that stuff really. So
yeah,
I avoid seeing that unless it's something that I definitely have to watch for whatever given reason. But like all those atrocities that were filmed, with like, gang rape and with, murder and with like cutting, like beheadings and stuff, like all that video footage exists. And I know that like your government saw a lot of those videos. I did remember seeing like, members of your government watching certain videos and then breaking down crying and stuff like that. So like, I know that
yeah,
that happened. And I think really like you guys should have just shoved all of that in people's faces up front. I mean, I know it was a matter of professionalism that you guys didn't do that, but I think
yeah.
the world needs to see stuff like that so they know what kind of evil is out there, and they know like why you guys are doing, what you're doing. And that kind of
Hmm.
evil, like as I've said before, I'll say it a million times. I'll keep saying it until I'm no longer walking around on this, plane of existence. There's evil out there that you can't negotiate with, and there's evil out there that you can't even comprehend. Like there are humans out there that will rape and behead women and children and pile children bodies up like firewood, because I've seen some of this with my own eyes in other places in the Middle East that I've operated in, and they will dump gas on piles of dead kids and light them on fire, you know um
Yeah,
and they have no problem like raping and mutilating and beheading, and they will do all this stuff, and they will videotape it. And like, if you want, that video footage is out there on the dark corners of the internet if you want to go look it up. I'm not going to
yeah,
direct anyone to that, but like it exists and it's out there. And so I think it's very important that you are in fact doing what you're doing, where you're like, hey, here's what we're out doing after the fact, here's what we're up against. Here's
Yeah.
the truth and the reality, on our level of what's going on over here. And I think that's really important information and evidence to get out to the world so that we can educate these idiots that sit in relative safety all over the world and have these really, really harsh judgments on what you're doing. And I've said it, I'll say it again. I told, I think one of my last podcasts, I was like, when I was discussing how the president was like, oh, we're going to talk to Israel about like dialing things back and maybe having a ceasefire. And I was like, no, fuck that. Stomp the gas pedal. Like, eliminate this threat. Like, while you've got this threat
exactly.
on the run and dismantled to the level that you guys have done so far, like, just continue. And I said, there's no reason to have any peace talks until the hostages get returned. And I'm not sure what it is. It's like 136 hostages that are unaccounted for, or is there more?
Right now it's 34.
Oh,
134.
134. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So
yeah,
until,
because we just had 2 gentlemen released in a very very specialized rescue mission.
Good.
Very.
I'm happy to hear that.
And
returned healthy.
I happen. Yep.
Good.
I was happy to be in the strip during that night, and
Good.
got to see some of those guys prepping. And so when my guys heard the news, we were like, "Yep, we knew it was those guys."
Yeah.
Because we. So, any case, it was one of those fun moments where you get to be a part of a very historic hostage. I mean, because these guys, just so you realize, like where they went into to go get these 2 hostages, it was deep into Rafiah, which is past where we're operating in Khan Yunis. So Rafiah is down south where most of the population is. So you're also where you have the highest number of bad guys that can, attack you. And when I say bad guys, I mean within the Palestinian, hidden within the Palestinian, refugees that have been sent down south. So very easy for the terrorists, of course, and we know that they do this. They dress in plain clothes and they just act like they're just one of the refugees. So you got a good number of these guys just, roaming around acting like a normal refugee, either gathering intel, looking for opportunities, what have you. And you're going in, like literally they went into the hornet's nest and plucked out these 2 men, which is just an incredible mission. And hopefully one day they'll be able to write about it. I highly doubt it, because the tactic and whatever they used was pretty cool. But again, it's that outside the box thinking that these guys do. And I get the privilege to know a lot of those guys and to hear their stories. And it's just cool to see how, I'm like, how did you? And they just tell you, they give you a little inside, whatever they're allowed to share with you as a friend. And you're just like, wow, and like, that's just a small piece of the big picture that you're never going to know about. And it's these people that they work behind the, in the shadows and work, behind, the closed doors that nobody gets to see or hear about, that perform this incredible hostage rescue mission, which, again, like I think any top tier unit in the world would look at that and say, holy crap, how'd you guys do that? I mean, it really was a very crazy mission. And to be honest, I think very few top tier guys would have even signed off on it. If again, like I said, if it got public, the kind of risks they took and the way they decided to go about it. And that's the reality, is that we have right now 134 hostages still held. One of them is a woman and her husband, the Bibas family. She has a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old. The 1-year-old was not even a 1-year-old when they were captured, and now has turned 1 year old in Gaza in captivity. And we just released the information about that as well, because we get to sometimes share the intel that we gather. And so the government decided to share that we gathered the intel of one of the security cameras that had captured her being sent to another, relocated to another housing, or where they're held. And what people I think don't understand, by the way, when we're talking about the hostages, we're not talking about like in the movies where you have a bunch of bad guys with guns and scary, and they put you behind, lock and key, and like in a prison style deal, and like torture you or whatever. We're talking about putting the civilians who are hostages in Palestinian Gazan homes, in their homes. Okay, so the family is having dinner in this, in the dining room, and one room over, okay, in the same house. Like they're under my house, under my roof, so to speak, right? They're right over there, and I'm enjoying dinner with my family, and over here's our hostages. Okay, that's how most of them are being held, and or underground and underground tunnels without light or anything, and you name it. And many of them come back with losing up to 50% of their body weight from when they got captured. So they're being malnutritioned. Some barely hanging in there just from not being able to eat. And again, they're being tortured. They're being raped, male or female. It doesn't matter. Apparently, the Muslim terrorists have this an obsession with sex and sexual organs. So for some odd reason, they have a gravitation towards that, and so typically, like I said, they just love to yeah, use sex as rape and or as torture. I mean, and it's very disgusting. It's very disgusting, the type of stuff that they've done. And like you're just mentioning now, for the world to be silent in light of all that information. And yes, we haven't been very good at publicizing maybe a lot of it, because Israel doesn't, I've noticed we don't like to play the victim. We like to show that we're strong, and that's actually part of our weakness is we don't like to show weakness. But the truth of the matter is you know, we're very vulnerable right now. The stuff that I've had to witness, I don't think most guys my age and who have been in the kind of units I've been in have ever had to witness anything like that, and have to overcome that, and to go out and carry out your mission without breaking down and just falling apart emotionally is probably been the hardest thing during out this whole war for me, at least. So yeah, we suck at public diplomacy. We suck at telling the world, what a victim we are in this war. Um, but the truth of the matter is if you look hard enough and you actually really care, you can see exactly what happened. The numbers are there, the footage is there. The question is, do you care? Or are you too busy looking at Israeli bombs and mushrooms over the skyline of Gaza and say, well, that's genocide. Well, do you know what we just bombed? You know what kind of target that is? And by the way, I've been up to 100 meters away from those explosions, as like they're happening right here next to me, okay, as we're operating. So it's not like, you know what I mean? It's not like we're just bombing the bad guys and a bunch of innocent people. Like, no, these are bad guys operating in and around where we're at. And if it weren't for the Air Force making that mushroom, my guys would be dead. Those guys would be dead. You know, those are all very specifically carried out airstrikes. And again, no other military in the world does that I'm aware of. Again, I'm always welcome to be corrected on this, but no other military in the world does this surgical tactics that we do. Um,
Yeah, we
so that's a fact.
yeah, we definitely I know when we before we went into Fallujah, we dropped flyers and and that were written in Arabic, and we're basically like, "Hey, we're coming soon." So, didn't give a specific timeline, but we were like, "Hey, we're coming soon. If you don't want to be here, you need to evacuate your family immediately because we're coming for the jihadis that are occupying the city." And so I remember we dropped flyers. I think it was like 3 weeks prior, and to give people
Hmm.
enough time to get out, and then went after it. But yeah, the surgical, like, um, you know, we also have like very surgical capabilities in terms of like what our support assets can, our air assets can do, our air platforms, our ISR capabilities. Like we have the technologies has been dialed in to be very very surgical as well. So I know that we've also tried to do a good job with like minimizing civilian casualties as well, So, um, yeah, I mean, it's another fact that, I saw on, I can't remember whose page it was on. I was on Instagram and I was watching, and it just made me laugh because people are like, um, oh yeah, they're just the term I heard was, or that the person wrote was like, oh, they're just carpet bombing all of Gaza. And I was like, no, that's not what's happening. And then I saw a video of, this Hamas fighter pop out, and he shot an RPG at some guys on the ground and then went back in the window. And then right after that, like, you guys had air stacked up on station and hit it. And I was like,
Oh yeah,
that's why they're dropping
yeah,
buildings, is because there's fighters that are in there that are actually combatants that are putting up a fight. And the other thing too that I'd really like to
yeah.
highlight is their tactic of, well, first of all, their belief system in terms of, like, if you die in the course of fighting the infidel, you are martyred and you will go to paradise, and you'll get your 72 virgins or whatever it is, horse shit that they believe in. But yeah,
Virginians.
yeah.
It's
Yeah,
Virginians.
yeah. Somebody should probably tell Virginia that. So yeah,
Yeah,
they believe in that, so they have no problem, one, sacrificing or martyring themselves, and they have no problem rounding up, because this is something that we experienced, was they would round up, like, innocent people that were just in the mix there, and they would bring them into a site that they were using for military operations, and they would keep human shields there so that when the airstrikes come and the press shows up and they're doing the BDA and pulling the rubble apart and they're pulling dead kids out of and dead women out of there, then that is also how they perform their information operations campaign, and that's how they
yep,
gain momentum in this whole belief system of uh, we're being discriminated against. It's genocide. The Israelis are the big bad guys, or the Americans are the big bad guys, and they're killing our innocent women and children. No, you specifically rounded
yeah,
up those women and children and took them to a military target and forced them to stay there, and they were killed because it was a sacrifice to Allah. And it is in
yep,
line with your belief system, and it is in line with your agenda and your ideology to do that. It's not by mistake. Okay, if there's civilians that are getting,
correct.
accidents do happen in the battle space. No matter how
Yeah,
careful and how surgical we are, accidents do happen in the battle space occasionally. And yeah, occasionally civilians, unfortunately, it's the nature of war. Civilians accidentally get killed from time to time. I mean, our government,
sure.
our government specifically, can't throw any fucking stones in that regard, because on the exfil of Afghanistan, our stupid ass government, killed an Afghan father and his, like, 7 kids with a drone strike, because they thought that he was involved with the bombing at Abbey Gate, and then they had to come back and be like, oh, whoops, sorry for the accident. So, you know,
Yeah,
um, negligence, and I'm not saying
and
it doesn't
yeah,
happen. Like, negligence and poor targeting and poor information and just wrong place, wrong time does happen. That's war, and that's the ugly
yeah,
reality and the nature of war. But I know that both of our countries try to do as good of a job as humanly possible with mitigating collateral damage in the battle space. But people that are
yeah,
like, oh, it's a genocide, and it's like you were saying earlier, when you're calling these people and you're like, hey, you need to evacuate this area because we're coming in, and they're like, videoing themselves flipping off the phone and cursing and saying, fuck you guys, come get us. If that's what you choose to do,
exactly.
okay, in the name of your ideology and your religion, cool. But the world should understand that happens, and that was their choice to stay in the battle space. And they, if they lose their lives because of that, then that's their problem. And I've said before, like,
Yeah,
the Palestinian people need to be held accountable and culpable for the government and the company that they keep. The government that they elect, which is Hamas, their governing body, is a terrorist
yeah,
organization. And when you are run and governed and managed by a terrorist organization who doesn't have the people's best interest at heart, it has their ideology and the momentum of that ideology, which is to kill the kafir, wipe the people of the book, which are the Christians and the Jews, off the planet. Like, that is their mission. And if that's your governing body, and you allow that to happen as a people, and you participate and cooperate with that as a people, you bear some accountability in what happens to you. I'm sorry, you just do.
100%, 100%. I mean, just look at like rewind to, what I just explained earlier. Day one for us started with me shuffling my family and kids to a bomb shelter, to safety and security. I didn't take them with me to the front. I didn't even take them to where, I'm in relative safety at my barracks. Okay. They're safe at home and I'm out fighting the bad guy. The bad guy, on the other hand, takes his family with him. Okay. They take other civilians with them and they pile them into their barracks, into their fighting positions. And like you pointed out perfectly, that's exactly what we encounter. So for me, here's the bottom line. If you're out there in the streets and you're protesting for the Palestinians, you're protesting against the genocide that the state of Israel is committing, so-called, then I want you to be full aware that that's exactly what you're supporting. You're supporting people with a demonic agenda that want to destroy you with the big mouth out there, advocating for them. And they want to get, after people like me because I have a belief system that's different to theirs. And I'm willing to fight and stand for that belief system, unlike the people with the big mouth who are out in the streets, because that's the only fight they know how to do, is to go and make a big loud noise. But you're not really willing to die for what you believe. That's the difference between that person and me. Okay? That's the difference between somebody like you and that person. You went out and you fought for your country and you fought for your values. And that's what cuts us apart from the rest of society, is that we put our tail, we put our butt on the line, so to speak, right? For what we believe and for the values that we hold dear and are willing to die for. And to me, the bottom line is real simple. Unless you're willing to fight for what you believe, you really don't have much to come and jump in our face and start yelling and screaming and making a bunch of noise. Because for me, it's real simple. No problem. Go join the military and go fight for what you believe. Go. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see you do that. Because most likely people like you aren't going to last very long. People like you are going to curl down and you're going to freak out and you're going to cry when bullets are flying over your head, when they're shooting mortars at you. And you're going to be like this, I didn't sign up for this. Exactly. Because that's not, we're fighting for you to have the freedom to go out in the street and to shoot your mouth. But at least have a little bit of respect for the people that are out there laying their lives on the line for you to do that and for me to hold my values. And don't go pointing at American soldiers that come back from Afghanistan and Iraq and call them baby killers because you saw some picture of some kid in a rubble that was pulled out by the bad guys that put him there in the first place.
Right.
If you're too stupid to understand that and to see that, then I really pity you. I really pity you. If that's the person that you are, I really pity you that you're so passionate about, screaming for that underdog, but the person that went and fought for your right to be screaming, you give zero cares about, nothing. And you call them names and you go on our social, platforms and you're making hateful comments. And it's like, you know what? I'm already willing to die for what I believe. I went out and fought for it, not just once, not just twice. I've been doing this for over 20 years. Okay. Every war that Israel's fought in, I was there with my guys and we all stood line toe to toe and we fought for our values. And what have you been doing? Sitting at Starbucks, enjoying free internet.
Going to Starbucks, getting free internet and complaining about everything in their life.
Wow.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going on.
So real simple, like if you really care about these things, and like you pointed out, come over here.
Yeah.
You know what? Go to Rafiah. Go hand out free shawarmas to the Palestinians that are suffering. And the true reality is, and I am being a little sarcastic, but with all truth though, I do care about the Palestinians. I care about the crap that they go through. I care about the lies that they've been fed and brainwashed from childhood. And that bothers me. And there's really nothing I can do to help them. But guess what? If you're a foreigner and you want to go join the Red Cross or any of these organizations that have been doing nothing of effect in the Palestinian controlled areas, why don't you join one of these organizations and actually bring some actual hope and light and joy and actual education to these kids? They're being brainwashed with demonic agendas that cause them to become, you know what? It's that little kid, right, that we didn't eliminate while I was there in 2004, that grew up to become the demon that came and raped my wife, my children, my kids.
Right.
It's that little kid that became a demon, right? That grew up through, throughout the time that we left the Gaza Strip, because we didn't eliminate all the bad guys when we left. We just hightailed and left. And that's just the wrong, to me, these are the wrong policies that our governments do. The United States does it. European nations do it. We do it. We go to war and we don't eliminate all the bad guys and that pure evil that you pointed out that really exists and the people don't understand. These are purely evil people. And they're going to raise that generation of kids that saw the big bad American soldier, the big bad Israeli soldier operating in their backyard. They're going to grow up and fearing me and then being brainwashed by those demons to go and fight me later. And that's the kind of people that carried out this attack. And these are the kind of people that we face today. And until we eliminate that threat once and for all completely and introduce re-education, there is no other solution. It's not about Israel being the big bad wolf and the Palestinians that are poor and what have you. It's both sides of this conflict, both sides of the civilians, both sides. Well, I wouldn't call them war fighters, but it's our war fighters having to fight their cowards, because I'll be honest with you, most of those guys are cowards.
Oh yeah.
They're not willing to fight you like real men. They pop out of holes and they pull these coward tactics where they shoot you in the back and run away. They're not going to face you face to face. Do you know how many hundreds of terrorists my unit trucked out of Gaza? In the hundreds that I got to witness with my eyes. Do you know how many thousands of them are sitting in our prisons right now? Okay? Most of them are cowards. They're not going to fight you face to face. And so, any case, we're there. We're willing to, die for what we believe in. These guys are cowards. They're not even willing to die for what they believe in for the most part. And unless we re-educate their future children with, again, I don't want to say, because I hate, saying like our values are this, because I don't believe in that. I don't believe in shoving down people's throats Western values or Western thinking, because it's not the same.
Yeah, and it doesn't work.
One thing
it's been proven that we proved for over 20 years in the Middle East. It does not. Pushing our ideology, our thought on freedom, our thoughts on democracy into people's lives that like culturally and religiously cannot digest it and understand it it's a futile effort. It doesn't.
But respecting humankind, respecting your neighbor, real basic values that is crossed the board and that crosses race, religion, what have you, you can do that. But you're not going to get that until you uproot these demonic terrorist warlords that are ruling those areas with their ideology that is just, people support Hamas and that ideology. I don't know what to tell you. I really don't know what to tell you, In fact, you know what? Here's what I can tell you. Why don't you get into Gaza and why don't you face me like a man? And we can fight it. We can fight for our values.
Yeah.
If you're that tough,
Right. Get off your keyboard and get in the fight.
Yeah. Because if you really believe in those values, then I need to kill you. Mm-hmm. That's my opinion.
Right.
That's my opinion. And my government and your government, whoever's government, should target these people. You either go to prison for life or we execute you. Real simple. Old school rules. And I know that's very extreme for a lot of people, but to me, that's not extreme. That's not extreme at all. Because if you believe in the murder and killing of other people, because, and whatever the list of because, well, you don't belong in society.
In a peaceful society. Yeah, it's not
my society.
Yeah, no, and and that is an extreme position, but it isn't extreme if you know the enemy that you're dealing with. Because they have no problem. Like you're, if you get captured, what do you think is going to happen to you? You're going to get raped. You're going to get tortured. You're going to get your head cut off on a sheet of plastic on a floor while they videotape it and put it on the internet. Like it's
Yeah,
an enemy that, I think you continue to call them demonic, and I, I agree with that. Like the activities that they participate in and the tactics that they employ are not anything that a rational human being would ever do to another human being. Like it is pure evil. And they
yeah,
continue to perpetuate that. And realistically, like, one of the things I learned through my time, in combat is there's a right way to fight a war, especially against this particular enemy. And it is through the only thing that they respect is massive sheer violence. Like that's the only thing that gets their attention. You can't negotiate with them.
unfortunately.
You
Yeah,
cannot negotiate with them. You're not going to sit there and like broker a deal with them that they're going to stick to or that they're going to respect. As a matter of fact, if you try to broker a deal with them, they take that as a sign of weakness and they exploit it.
yep,
So the only thing that they
exactly.
respect is violence. And so I learned
Yeah,
that early on by during my time of like running a fit element and training, working very closely with our partner force in Afghanistan and Iraq, like watching their senior enlisted and officers, slap their men around and like just slapping grown ass men if they talk back. And that kind of
yeah,
took me by surprise a little bit as I was like 25 years old, sergeant, just very new to training foreign military units and the whole culture piece and learning that, getting a really hard crash course on that. And watching that, I learned very early on, and I had a an Iraqi officer, a lieutenant colonel. I drank tea with him, and I brought it up, and I'm like, hey, you're not going to build good teamwork if because I was like thinking about my Western philosophy and my Western way of leadership. I was like, you're not going to build good teamwork or cohesion if you're abusing your soldiers. And he said, oh, no, no, no. This is where you Americans don't understand. We only respect force and we only respect strength. And so I watched it over and over again. And then I had to shift, I had to shift gears and get creative with my leadership strategies because at times I would, when I'm, out there working with our partner force and trying to get them to maneuver and do what I need them to do, they would just completely disregard. And so I had to, by with and through my, Iraqi officers, or, Afghani officers, I had to, basically get them to go be my heavy hand. And, if I had a junior grade officer or junior grade NCO that was not doing what he needed to do when he needed to do it, I'd have them go over there and they would, put a boot up his ass and smack him around. And then he would be like, oh, okay, I got to do this. And he would get on his job and go do his job. And so
right.
they culturally only respect strength and through violence, essentially. So, and that's
Yeah,
another thing culturally that these, fence sitters, they do not understand these cultural and religious nuances that are extremely uh, relevant in the situation. So,
yeah.
what are some of the new, like, because I've been watching this really closely. What are have you experienced any new, since you've said, hey, I've been on the front lines of like every conflict. Like, are they employing any new TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures that you've seen that you're like, oh, whoa, that we haven't seen them do that before.
Yeah, I would say the tunnel warfare is new. Um, my unit, when I was serving in Gaza, we actually were in a base that we heard what do you call it? Digging under the
Mm-hmm.
tunnel, and sorry, tunnel digging under our base. And so I remember we were reporting it to our commanders and to our officers, and up the chain, and each one was like, nah, nah, that's nothing, no, no, no. And and then I remember when I was out from away from that area, I was deployed in another place, and then the report came in that that base had blown up. And then they discovered, oh yeah, there was a tunnel dug underneath up to the base, and they laid charges, and then they blew up the base, and oh my gosh. So that was like a first for us, and that was back in 2004. And essentially, so take that on the small scale and then quadruple it to over 500 miles of underground tunnels. Okay.
Oh, wow.
So over 500 miles of underground tunnels everywhere you turn in Gaza. Everywhere you turn, there's a tunnel. Everywhere you turn, there's a shaft leading into one of those tunnels. And the shafts are found in the most random places, right? You would think, okay, it would be away from the population, away from, like prying eyes or what have you. No, no. It's in every part of society. You'll have a shaft outside a kindergarten, one out of, where they have like slides and toys and stuff that, outdoor, whatever you call them, you know, the kids play in. And then you'll have them outside of a mosque or in a mosque. You'll have them outside of hospitals or in a hospital. Okay. So all of this is what we see in every nuance. Okay. Either just an adjacent to or literally in the facilities themselves, you'll have a shaft leading into these terror tunnels. So every part of society, UNRWA, okay, United Nations, in their facilities, using their resources, their trucks, their vehicles, their compounds. The United Nations, went uproar because we blew up their headquarters, UNRWA's headquarters in the Gaza Strip, because it was turned into a terrorist headquarters. Okay, over half of the staff for UNRWA, United Nations, are terrorist affiliates. Okay, that we proved and we showed and what have you. So basically, what I saw in 2004, we got to see on crack in 2024, so to speak. Okay, so what we saw little tastes of, little tidbits of, where it's like, oh my gosh, they used an ambulance, for terrorists, to transport terrorists from place to place. Now they're using every ambulance. Now they're using every United Nations vehicle. Now they're using every part of society. It's not just the one mosque. It's like every freaking mosque, every freaking, hospital. It's like, you know what I'm saying? It's like basically it's quadrupled the infrastructure, and essentially what that also means is that the tactics now are much more complex, because you could have a terrorist come up right where you've already cleared an area, right? Because you've cleared all these buildings and, these neighborhoods, what have you. And then out of a pier, you have a terrorist come out of the tunnel and now reinfest into the area that they know the military is cleared. And or they like to use a very common tactic. They like to use, so if you have like a main road, and then you have the alleyways. They like to use the alleyways as a means to attack you from your blind spot, right? From where you're vulnerable, right? Because they're protected from all the buildings as you're clearing an area, right? And so all you see is the buildings, buildings, and then right as you cross over that alleyway, they'll nail you with an RPG or sniper fire or what have you. So a lot of that kind of stuff where it's very clever, using house to house maneuvering where you can't see them maneuver from one house to another, right? So going through the walls, building little mazes, so to speak, to come out one area and then pop out another place, and so on and so forth. So it's a very annoying army, a very annoying enemy to fight.
I've experienced it. I know exactly what you're talking about. We did this.
Yeah.
We had it in Fallujah where, so me being in charge of our partner force, my job was to maneuver our partner force to help kind of go through and be a back clearing mechanism. Like our guys would push forward to a phase line, and then my guys would come in and occupy the phase line behind them and provide security and do all of the back clearing, because they're hard in the fight and they're just like pushing. And so our job was to come in and at first during the initial push, we were like right along the river, and that whole my guys were in charge of pushing down through a district to take back the famous Blackwater Bridge where the Blackwater contractors got killed. Um, we
Yeah,
ended
yeah,
up taking that area, and my guys' job was to provide security and continue to like back clear that area, because what we would have happen was we would push, our main efforts would push forward to a phase line, and then guys would start coming out of the same thing. They'd have tunnels dug, they'd have bunkers dug, they'd have these like little secret rooms built in these houses that you wouldn't know, because we're, in a hurry, or not in a hurry, but we're being very aggressive with our momentum. And
right,
it's really easy, as when you're being very aggressive and you're, putting pressure on the enemy to, especially in an urban environment, as chaotic as it is, like it's easy to bypass things that you were like, you can go in and do a quick visual. You can even do somewhat of a detailed search, like flip over some beds, move a little bit of furniture. You're like, cool, yep, clear. And you're not clear because there's like one tile in the corner underneath the little tiny dresser that you didn't move, that you think a human can't even fucking fit in, that they will build a spider
exactly.
hole in a little bunker, and they'll have 16 dudes hidden under there. And then as soon as you
Yep,
blow
yep,
by that and you go to your next phase line, they'll come up from behind you in areas that you think are
yep,
already done, already cleared. Oh, that area is good. It's been cleared. And so what we had to do is I had to essentially, after we experienced some nasty firefights, because of that exact thing happening to us, I started had to, I'd have one element of my guys holding local security. I'd have one element of my guys along the river, watching along the river. Because the other thing they were doing is they were coming out of palm groves, and they would come down to the river at nighttime, and they would have beach balls, and they would take beach balls and they would inflate them, and then they would hug those beach balls and they'd paddle across the river, and then they would jump right over the road and then infiltrate into the city. And that's how we had we had rat lines that were coming in
wow,
behind us through areas that we had
yeah,
already cleared. So I had to have one section of my guys watching the river. I had to have one section of my guys providing local security at the phase line in the house that we had strong pointed. And then I had to have satellite patrols, security patrols going on in neighborhoods behind us that we had already just cleared through, to make sure that we wouldn't get attacked from behind. And so,
hmm,
I've experienced, exactly everything that you're talking about. And one of the things that they did early on during our invasion was we would be, you know, maneuvering through Iraq very aggressively, and we would get to certain phase lines, and we would hit military targets. We'd be hitting these military targets, and it was just dry hole after dry hole after dry hole. Nothing there, no people, no weapons, no equipment. And then pretty soon we started realizing, like, oh, they've abandoned these. They're not in their military installations anymore. And so then I remember we were pushing through this one area, and we got lit up and ambushed, from an area that was right next to a school. And so, a grammar school for kids. And so we maneuvered through that area, killed a few guys, continued to push, and they did what you described, where like a few of them would fight with us and get our attention, and then they would hit us with an RPG from another angle, and then we would neutralize that guy, and we would continue to move forward, and they would just hit us, break contact, hit us, break contact, hit us, break contact, and they would push back, and then they would evaporate into the populace. And so we ended up, um, we were getting heat signatures on our thermals from this school. So we went to the schoolhouse and went inside the school, and sure enough, crates of weapons, crates of explosives, crates of
yep,
RPGs, mortars, AKs, Dragonoffs, all kinds of loaded magazines, ammunition, and we found military uniforms in piles in the corner, because what they'd done is they left their base, occupied a school, a children's school, and
yep,
then we started, and then they would set up shop there, and then they stripped their uniforms and they got into civilian clothes so that they could hit us and then bounce back and blend into the local population. And
exactly,
so these are the
exactly,
tactics, so that once again we're back to
yep,
people that don't understand the nature and the diversity of this kind of warfare, because they do employ like hit and run cowardly, tactics, where they will hit you and then they'll blend in, or they'll hit you and they'll disappear into a spider hole, or they'll come out of a spider hole that you've already cleared an area and they'll hit you in the back. Just like I just watched this one video of this fucking retard running out of he run like, you've got IDF guys that are like holding a security position, and I think they're engaging in a building in front of them, and this guy runs out behind him, and throws a grenade, overthrows the berm, it blows up. Like the dudes, to the IDF guys, turn around, they're like, "What the fuck?" And they burn this guy down because he's running at him with a knife. And that
Correct.
is the exact nature of like same shit that we had to deal with in Fallujah. They would do crazy stuff like that. A lot of times they would be strapped up with an S vest and they would run up and try
Right.
and get amongst us and clack off an S fest to create a mass casualty event. So, or they would do the same thing.
Yeah.
they would, because of their ideology, think, okay, well, I'm gonna martyr myself now, and they'd run out with like one grenade, or they'd run out with a knife, or, and so we've had to deal with, I have a lot of experience dealing with the exact same thing that you just described. So it sounds to me like it's, although they've improved um, the scope of what they're doing with like using tunnels, it sounds like very much the same tactics that we've been facing for the last 20 plus years. So my next question would be, in light of conflicts in other parts of the world, have you guys seen anything with regard to them using drones? Because drone warfare is starting to proliferate very, very heavily. A lot of people are
Yeah.
starting to see what man portable drones are capable of and what they can do. And I know we've been using them for quite some time. Um,
Yeah.
we basically
So
we
yeah.
our two countries pioneered a lot of like the drone warfare that you're seeing other that it's
Hmm.
becoming more mainstream now. Are you seeing them employ any of that?
Yeah, for sure. So they're using, that was another big difference, of course, is the whole drone warfare that we saw a lot of in Ukraine with the war with
Hmm.
Ukraine and Russia. And so very exact same tactics, send out a drone with a mortar that it will drop into, into a crowded group of soldiers. Um, in fact, that one of those drone attacks happened not too far from where we were, and we helped with evacuating the wounded from that attack. In fact, there was one young soldier was killed who was grouped up with his friends there, wherever they were, their rally point there. And drone came over and just dropped a nice little deal and a nice little package. So it completely revolutionized, of course, how the tanks prepared themselves. So all of our tanks all of a sudden have this special netting that they had reinforced and added another layer to the tank, so that if a drone were to drop a mortar like that on the tank, then it will dissipate away from the fighters and not right onto them. So you had a lot of things like that. My Hummer didn't have that. We didn't have any special thing protecting us in that regard, but a lot of easy targets like tanks that the drones would target is what we kind of fixed up their defensive measures. And then of course we had a lot of our technology that we employed in the war to detect the drones, to eliminate the drone attack, and so on. So we definitely have those capabilities. I don't think that's some big secret. Um, um, but that is completely a different other, um, how to say, it's a whole other part of warfare that if you've been fighting in war as long as we have, that it's something you never really thought you would have to face on the battlefield or think about. And and like we all joke, and because the ongoing joke is that we took down more of our drones than we took down of theirs, because the soldiers are of course trigger happy whenever there's a drone flying around. It's like, oh, there's a drone, take it out. Um, I personally wasn't too nervous from the drone attacks. I just didn't really think about it too much personally. The funny thing is, I operate drones in filmmaking and stuff that I do um, outside of the military. So I actually help train our unit for drone attacks to help identify them, see them, notice them, and in fact, notice how much you can't notice them because of the sound of the Humvee or the tanks or the APCs, in the battle space. And so that was something I wanted to point out to the soldiers in my training is, hey, notice how you can't see if you don't see the drone, you're not going to hear it, you know? So that was part of the training that we put into our personal training, which was not very common in the military, I would say. Unless you really thought about it, which we did. And the reason why we thought about it is because we saw and we're learning from the warfare with Ukraine. And so we're like, hey, there's no reason why the enemy won't employ those tactics in the next war. So thankfully, we train our guys. I use my own drone during training, and like I said, I was just getting the guys familiarized with that threat. And yeah, so it's definitely another phase in warfare. But the key is always to be one step ahead. The key is always to be thinking ahead. And as you know, also with the military, it's hard to get the big body to kind of change course unless we get hit with the threat in reality. So when I brought up drone warfare to begin with, a lot of the higher ups kind of, made faces or whatever. But my group of guys were like, no, that's definitely, a concern,
If
and,
they
and
have
we're
any
concerned about it.
questions, just show them all of the footage coming out of Ukraine right now, because that drone fight there is becoming a mainstream
Yeah.
like TTP for both sides of the house, and they're doing crazy stuff with like man portable stuff. It's not just they're not they're really the whole they've taken the first person drones, the FPV drones, which fly much faster, and they're starting to
Yep. Yep.
weaponize those and arm those with a payload and just zoom those, kamikaze those right into people
Sure.
versus the whole
Sure.
like regular Mavic drones that they hover above and they drop a mortar or they drop a grenade. No, these
Yeah.
FPV drones are extremely deadly. So any of your higher ups that are wanting to argue, I'd just be showing them like footage from Ukraine, being like, "Hey, this is where we could potentially be going. So we might want to start thinking about countermeasures for these type of attacks."
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what about? Let me ask you this: what type of you know equipment are you seeing? Are they well equipped? Are they well trained? Are they wearing body armor? Do they have sensor packages? Like, are you killing dudes with night vision and with thermals, or how well equipped are these guys?
Right. Well, put like this. The majority of your guys that you're facing are not really well equipped, honestly, or trained. So the higher numbers are just your typical jihadist that just, wants to join the fight the big bad Satan or the small Satan, and you're the big Satan in America, whatever. Uh, so, 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 so it's this whole like, I want to, and like they want to be a hero, right? And so they get a little bit of weapons training, a little bit of, AK training or whatever. So they'll learn a specific discipline, but they're not like your typical warfighter who can pick up any weapon and use it, right? So usually it's specific training for a specific weapon. Then you have your more advanced warfighter who's gone to the Baca Valley, that has been training under Iranian fund and Iranian training facilities in Syria. And so they get real good in-depth training. I mean, really good. And so those are the ones who are usually going to train all the other guys in the different disciplines and be like, you be in charge with this, you be in charge with, you're the guy who's just going to be looking at the periscope all day, looking for military troops and pass us the information.
Have you guys killed or captured any
Um,
Iranian Quds commandos that are in the battle space, advising and equipping and assisting with the Hezbollah or the Hamas forces?
that particular information I don't have,
Okay,
and even if I did, I probably am not allowed to say.
right.
But what I can tell you is that we know for a fact that those guys are very much involved and very much either in the funding or the training, and a lot of that same training is mostly being invested heavily in Hezbollah. So so the way we look at it is like this: is Hamas and fighting in Gaza is one thing, But fighting in Lebanon is a different story because now you're fighting against real military, real tactics, and some of them even have really high-end special forces training. So that's a good way, I guess, to kind of look at the difference of the two battle spaces. And we've been fighting in both fronts, actually. We've been fighting in Lebanon as well. That's less covered by the
Yeah,
media,
that was my next question. I
but
was going to say, have you
yeah,
guys seen anything going on that side with because of what's going on and the fact that you're surrounded on all sides by Muslim countries that
yeah.
want to wipe you off the face of the planet? Like, have you seen anything with like Hezbollah coming down from the north and creating problems from you while you're also engaging Hamas in Gaza?
Yeah. Yeah. So we've been fighting actually three fronts. So while we've been fighting in Gaza, my guys and all the Gaza guys, who have been deployed there, we have a bunch of guys deployed up north as well and have been holding off the threat in the north. We've been engaging with the Radwan units. Those are they're the ones that are basically, like I said, they're the more like special forces guys within the Hezbollah outfit. And again, they're more like a typical military, like your Marines or your regular army guys, what have you. That's what you're going to be facing in Lebanon as far as the Hezbollah army. They're a terrorist group, but they're structured more like a military, and their training and etc. And then the third front that we've been facing is actually in Judea, Samaria, and East Jerusalem. So one of my good friends that has been fighting in those areas, in those operations, his unit has done a lot of work in the Hebron area. His name is Nir Maman. He's actually a legend in the in the military community. Um, and right now he's living in Canada, and he's also a police officer on his day-to-day work. Um, and any case, so he's been 3.5 months deployed with his guys in the Judea Samaria area. When I say Judea Samaria, we're talking about what the world calls the West Bank. So that's just south of Jerusalem and just north of Jerusalem. These are enclaves of Palestinian towns that are clumped in an area that is essentially in the heart of Israel, in the state of Israel. So it's right in the heart of Israel. So it's a very tricky place that we're in right now. Okay, so you have an enemy within, so to speak, right, within the heart of Israel. You have an enemy on the southern Egyptian, not Mexico border,
Right.
and then you have, and
I'm glad you said that. That's great. Yes.
and then that's why I'm not worried about what Mr. Biden has said lately
Yeah, I can
because
hardly
we
wait.
have no business in Mexico.
Right.
So good. I'm glad to know that we can keep our operations going in the Gaza Strip.
Yeah. Yeah. The
Because he said Mexico,
right.
so we're good.
Yeah. Right.
And so that's what I would do if I was in our foreign policy making.
Right.
I'd be like, no problem. You all heard him, right? Mexico, good.
We'll stay out of
So let's keep
Mexico, Mr.
fighting in Gaza.
President. No problem.
We'll stay out of Mexico. And then the last front, of course, is up in the north. So yeah, and so when I say up in the north, it's not just Lebanon, it's actually also from Syria.
Right.
So we've had attacks coming from Syria and Lebanon simultaneously, because for people that don't understand, Hezbollah, like I said, they're like a real military and what have you, and then they're the most funded and trained military force outside of Israel, threatening Israel directly from Iran. So Iran is the number one funding, and they're also Shiites. As far as the Muslim world is either Sunni or Shiite. Sunni is basically 90% of the Muslim world, and about 10%, again, these are rough numbers, about 10% are Sunni. So Iran is a Sunni Muslim population, and that's why they support Hezbollah, who is a Sunni Muslim terrorist organization. Okay. So all the funding goes to those guys. A lot of training goes to those guys, and it comes via Syria, right? So it's in and out of Syria. It's involved with Syria, um, and so that's why Syria is technically a proxy of Iran. That through their efforts and their help during the Arab Spring and what have you and what have you and what have you, going back a little bit in time here, have completely taken over Lebanon, which for people who don't understand the Middle East, Lebanon, just like Israel, Israel is the exception to the rule of the Middle East, that we have a democracy, we have many cultures, many people groups, many ethnic minority groups here, all living in a democracy. That's what Lebanon used to be in the Middle East before
Correct.
Hezbollah took over.
Correct. Yeah.
So Lebanon used to be a democracy of mainly Muslim, Christian, Druze, and I'm trying to think what other ethnic group was up there. It'll come to me later. But in any case, they had basically these groups all living together in a somewhat of a democracy for the Middle Eastern style of governing. And so they weren't the kind that smack you in the back of the head like you were talking about. They weren't the aggressive Middle Eastern, rule by force and power. They were like, hey, let's just like live and let live, and very progressive for the Middle East. And many called it the Paris of the Middle East. And then Hezbollah took over, and essentially it's Islam overall.
Yeah.
And
It's
the
Sharia
Christians
law.
who do live there, it's Sharia law. And the Christians who do live there, they live there as dhimmi. They live there as subservient to the Islamic rule. And essentially, if you're going to voice your opinion against, of course, the go kill Israel narrative, you're going to lose your head.
Correct.
And unfortunately, the Paris of the Middle East is now not the Paris of the Middle East anymore. And ever since then, Lebanon is just going downhill, sadly. And I say that because I personally have a lot of good friends from Lebanon, and I know that Lebanon can be a very beautiful place, can be a place that we can have mutual respect and friendship as a neighboring country. But thanks to Hezbollah, again, it's always these terrorist organizations, these terrorist groups, these ideologies that are demonic. They take over a society, they take over a people, and they just ruin everything, and they send it to crap. And just look at the Gaza Strip, and people are saying, how Israel's doing this and Israel's doing that. Yeah, but it's because of, and it's because of, there's a cause and there's a root of this problem.
Yes. Cause and
And
effect.
so if you look at the destruction of Gaza right now, don't point the finger at me, point it at Hamas. If you don't like the way Lebanon is today, don't point your finger at, whoever, point it at Hezbollah. I mean, I can tell you exactly who's the cause and effect behind all of these, destructions. And like you guys faced with ISIS, okay? If it was ISIS or Boko Haram or all of these, I mean, alphabetical soup name terrorist entities, it's always because of them. They come in and they ruin everything, and they destroy lives, they destroy civilizations. And the lesson learned for me is simple. People like you and me need to stand up against them and annihilate them, and let us do that. If not, they're just going to keep wreaking havoc and destroying things.
Yeah. They'll continue to come back and come back and come back. I mean, the proof is there from, how the years and years of conflict that you guys have had to endure and deal with, and also everything that's happened in the Middle East since, 2001. I like to remind everybody, like, we were attacked on, 2001, like 3,000 Americans got killed because people were, we're over here, mind our own business, everybody's life as usual. And we had terrorists, extremist terrorists that were training on our, Al-Qaeda operatives that trained on our soil, came over here, infiltrated, trained on our soil, learned how to fly planes, hijacked planes, flew them into buildings while we were over here. mind our own business. You guys have tried to maintain, because you're different circumstances than us, with being surrounded by, um, I try and explain this to people all the time. I'm like, what if we were at war with Canada and Mexico constantly? Or on a smaller level, like you live in Colorado. What if you were at war with, everyone in New Mexico, everyone in Wyoming, everyone in Nebraska and South Dakota, and like completely surrounded? What if they wanted to kill you and they were launching attacks into your town? Like you couldn't go to the grocery store without your gun and your body armor because you're worried about getting attacked, getting kidnapped, getting a suicide vest clacked off. So you guys have had to deal with this for a long time. Um,
Yeah.
what, you know, it's continued to proliferate. It's not getting better. It continues to get worse. And so that's why I'm like these, these, unfortunate political narratives and agendas that come in and take over and take root, and the whole like, oh well, you've been too heavy handed. Well, no, the problem is you haven't been heavy handed enough. You have not been
Yeah.
heavy handed enough. You have to, the only way to deal with this is to root it out and kill it. So my opinion is always foot on the gas pedal. Now, you guys had the similar situation in 2007, if I'm not mistaken, with a very similar thing. I don't think on the scale as October 7th, but you guys had a massive problem in 2007 with Hezbollah on the Lebanon border, shooting Katyusha rockets and launching attacks over the Lebanon border in 2007, correct? And you guys had to
Yeah.
launch an
Two,
offensive.
two, yeah. That was the second Lebanon war, and that was in 2006.
Okay.
And the way it started actually was we had reservists. They were just finishing out their reserve duty where they patrol the border between Israel and Lebanon. And it was a well-planned attack. Again, like I said, these guys are much more efficient and well-trained. And so they attacked. They completely pummeled the vehicle with 50 cal machine gun, RPGs, you name it. I mean, the Hummers were like, they were melting. And they accomplished to take out two bodies of the reservists, bring them over to Lebanon and hold them captive until, whatever wishes of typically all these bad guys taken out of your prisons, blah, blah, blah. And then Israel went to war. We went to war because then they were firing rockets and so on and so forth. So yeah, that was the last big war that we had technically. Up until then, it's been more operations. The 2009, and then the last one was in 2014, if I remember correctly. It might have been another one just after that, but 2014 was the other big operation that took a few weeks. Again in Gaza, simultaneously while simultaneously defending the northern border. But yeah, so in 2006 was the last big one with Lebanon, technically.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: how are you balancing your mental health? Because and I don't want this to be offensive to you, but I watched the post of
Hmm.
you like standing at the coffee shop, and it was you're watching the espresso machine pour the coffee, and then you're drinking the coffee, and just the look on your face and your eyes, like I laughed, and I hope that's not offensive to you, because I laughed and I was
Yeah.
like, oh, he's got the 1,000 yard stare going on right now, and so it reminded me of several times I've had where I was in combat one day and my
Yeah.
rotation was over and I get put on a plane and literally flown home, and like 18 hours later I'm standing at a coffee shop, completely safe, looking around at civilians, trying to drink
Yeah.
a cup of coffee too and trying to process. And so my question for you is like, how are you managing like your mental health, because you've got a regular rotation schedule where you're going out in the battle space, conducting offensive operations, seeing some really gnarly
Yeah.
stuff, participating
Yeah.
in, the eradication of humans is not at bad breath distance, is not for the faint or weak of, heart at all. And the things that you're
Yeah.
seeing in terms of, um, you know, face to face combat with an enemy. And then, you do that for a block of time and then you're back at home. Like you're sitting comfortably at home right now in your study, But I saw that post on your social media, and I did get a laugh out of it because I've been there. I've experienced that exactly, where I'm like,
Yeah.
what is going on right now? Where am I? What, and you're just a little bit disheveled and a
Yeah.
little bit confused. Like, hours before I was like jocked up in kit with nods on shooting dudes. And now I'm like trying to drink an espresso. So like
Yeah.
how's your mental health been, and how are you processing that? And what kind of like healing practices do you participate in to like help so that, that doesn't become an issue for you?
Yeah. Um, I think this is an important question that a lot of us who have been there are asking the same questions because I don't have the answer to it. It's definitely a science that is being developed, I think, still. Um, and we are supposed to get through the sessions with our psych eval with a psychologist, a military psychologist that, goes through all these things and what have you. So everything I'm going to say now is on a personal level. This is my opinion. It's not professional insight. This is not something that I got from my shrink or what have you. Um, my opinion, because again, like I said, we do talk about it. We do discuss it. Why do some guys get affected by PTS really bad? And why do others seem like they don't have any, like nothing at all? Um, and I know with me, I definitely struggle with getting back to normal life. And the main thing is I personally just don't like crowds. I don't like to be and I don't like to be in public spaces at all, in general. And maybe that's because of the war, continue in and out of war, and conflict all the time. I don't like to be surrounded by people. I know some people get really offended when I ask them to step away because here in the Middle East, we don't know what personal space is. And people are up against you, and I'm armed. And I personally don't want somebody too close to me if I need to defend myself. And it's like, I've given you the advantage already because you're like here. So do me the favor and give me the peace of mind of step another half step behind, back or away from me, please. And I've had some interesting engagements with people on that issue. Um, so yeah, I would say I'm not your typical Israeli in that sense. I don't like to be up against people. I don't like people up against me. Um, and yeah, there's just trying to get back to a rhythm and to life is very difficult. It's not easy, but I think the easiest thing I can say is, or the advantage that you have is if you come with a background of faith, because I think when you know why you went to fight, what you fought for, it helps resolve a lot of those issues. So, when you believe in the Bible, there's a God, there's a Satan, there's good, there's evil, right? When you believe that there's nothing, you're an atheist, then how do you justify the actions of people like Hitler? Or how do you justify the actions of people like October 7th? You can't justify that. Like you know what I mean? Like, why do some people act like absolute demons and why do other people not? And so I think all those questions become very hard to answer. And I think the other difficult thing that I've noticed why there's probably a higher number of PTS cases with U.S. troops and Israeli troops, because I like to compare those two again because there's a lot of um, cooperation between the two countries. We train, together and we learn from each other. And so I look at the U.S. military and I know of a lot of these cases. I think one thing that's difficult for the warfighter is the political correctness that's come into the military world in identifying the enemy and who the enemy is that we're fighting, right? There's a lot of political correctness on how you the terminology used about the terrorists about their ideologies, etc. And the more you try to be politically correct in saying this is the bad guy, right? And giving a good, assessment. This is the bad guy because he believes this, and because this, and because this, and because this. Say, yeah, but we can't say it's Islam, so we can't say it's Muslim. Oh, and we can't say this, yeah, because some Muslims believe that jihad isn't fought on the battlefield, it's an internal struggle, blah blah. So we don't talk about, it's not that, right? You know what I mean? So the more you try to kind of weed out the who the bad guy is, the what it is I'm fighting for, it makes it very difficult to justify it when you're back home that you just took part in a lot of bloody fighting. And it's like, I don't understand. Like, what was that all about? Afghanistan, Iraq. Here it's my backyard. Here, you know what I mean? Like, it's easier for me to justify the why, It's not a 9/11 that happened in New York City. It happened here. And I know people that were there. I know people that died on that day. I know people that were attacked because we're such a small country too, right? So it affects everybody. There isn't like, oh yeah, I heard about that in Wyoming. No, it's like we heard about it. It happened. Like it happened here. Happened like an hour from me. It happened 10 minutes from me. It happened right in my backyard. So for us, it's easier, I think, to process because there isn't the conflict of the why and the what that I fought for. And I've noticed that people that in my in my surroundings that have more of a faith base, they have less of a time struggling with the nuances of justifying what you're doing and why you're doing what you're doing.
Okay, we're back. We had some technical difficulties there. We had a dead battery outage, and for a second, because of what all the things that we've discussed during the course of this conversation, and the fact that the enemy is in the backyard, I was like, signal just goes dead, and I'm like, oh man, I hope there was no Katyusha rocket. I hope there was no like
Yeah,
RPG that just hit the study while we were sitting here talking. So I'm glad it was just a battery
yeah,
issue and we're back up and running. So we left off at my question for you basically was how you're managing your mental health with bouncing back and forth
yeah,
between frontlines combat and family life and some form of normalcy. And were basically discussing how faith is your cornerstone and understanding your why.
yeah,
What are you doing, like, in terms of like, I'm sure prayer is a huge part of it, but are you doing any type of meditation? Like, do you do hot and cold therapy? You mentioned like you do, like you guys all have psychologists that you speak to and stuff. What is there anything else you're doing, like nutrition wise or exercise? Like, what are you doing to help keep your body regulated from being hyper vigilant all the time? Because that
yeah,
I learned really early on that being hyper vigilant, having like just massive amounts of cortisol in your system all the time is not healthy, and it causes problems. So what are you doing in addition to your faith and prayer to manage
yeah.
your body and your mental health?
So I think that helps. So your faith is going to help you process things on a mental level, right? Emotional level. Um, but I think another thing is a good thing you pointed out is your diet and physical fitness. So for me, those things go together. Getting the right amount of rest, getting the right amount of exercise in a week for your age, for your weight, for your whatever, and then having a diet that is going to support all that. So I do all those things. I take, the guys all make fun of me because I have like a long list of vitamins. And so even on deployment, I was trying to keep it up. So lots of jokes going around there with the guys, like look at this guy with his, his pharmacy wherever he goes. Um, and I think that's important. I think that if you have the discipline, and it's not if you have, because we all have discipline. It's something that you develop. Sorry, we all don't have the discipline, but discipline is something that you create, right? And if you don't create that discipline in your lifestyle, it's so easy to, you know, just get sucked into everyday life and routine and work and stress and what have you, and then that stress leads to bad eating habits because you're too tired to make an actual cooked meal at home, and so you're gonna grab something quick. Again, this is more for people, probably in your audience. They're listening from the West. Here, it's less of that, although we do have that as well. And then there's like you're not even gonna go out, right? So you're gonna order in now. It's like you're not even gonna make the effort to go get the meal. The meal is gonna come to you, and then what you're going to be consuming is most likely not going to be something that is going to be a substance that's going to properly feed your body. Um, so that's what I'll do is I'll take a lot of, like I said, I'll eat well, and mostly thanks to my wife. She really takes on making sure that we have a stable, um, breakfast, lunch, and dinner schedule for the whole family. Um, and that's also something that I benefit from by working from home. Most of my work that I do is from home. And then when I'm on the field and when I'm doing executive protection, though, that really sucks because it goofs up with my being able to eat what I prefer to eat, and so then you're just eating whatever is available in the space of with your client, which I don't normally eat with my client, but when they're in on a doing a meeting or wherever, and then you're finding that small window of opportunity to grab something and eat something, and so like a protein bar or what have you, and then you're back to just doing stuff that is not as great. But again, if you fight for in your lifestyle and in your day to day to do any one of those things, preferably all of them. I think it's going to revolutionize most people's lives. Hydration, drink lots of water. That's one of those things that I think a lot of us kind of take for granted, especially in wintertime. It's like, what? Hydrate? What are you talking about? I'm not sweating at all. What are you talking about? So hydration is very important as well. Um, yeah. So again, I'm not going to give the long list of, I guess, which vitamins and which things I take, but most of them are natural. For example, vitamin C, right? You can take a vitamin C that says 1000 cc or 1000 C or whatever they label those. So that's not a real vitamin. I don't think I don't know how much they're aware of that, but when you see any vitamin C or vitamin B or whatever that says this much grams of whatever is in this, that's not naturally produced. So I like to take naturally produced vitamins. So usually it'll come in some kind of dehydrated form. So my vitamin C actually comes in crystals, and I don't know how much, cc of milligrams of what I'm taking. I know I take an X amount per day. I mix it in my water, and I'm getting pure vitamin C, right? So that's just one example, and people can go and do studies on it if they like, and see what works best. But so I look for like pure, naturally, like what you get from nature, not what's produced in a laboratory type vitamins and so on. So that's just one opinion of what I do, my lifestyle, and I think it helps. It helps, like you said, it helps with your emotional and because I think what people don't realize, I think a lot of times, is a lot of our emotional stress and the things that we deal with emotionally, anger, claustrophobia, all the things that you'll have that come from as symptoms from PTS. A lot of those things can get eliminated when you have a right diet and whatever, because a lot of that is chemical imbalances, right? Stressors that your body's been through, and you need to get them out, right? You need to get all like you basically need to get all that stuff out of your system, and a lot of that really is due to all those things I just pointed out.
Yeah,
That
I didn't realize how critical
you know,
it was early on, after I ended my operational career, and I suffered a bit for a long time until I finally started getting getting all this stuff dialed in. One of the things that I found is like paramount to the success of my day is relative to the amount of sleep I get, and how the quality of that sleep. And the quality of that sleep comes from, good nutrition, good work, good exercise routine, getting out, moving your body, doing those things. Really, really helps. And there's been times where I've had to take sleep aids, and it's necessary because if you're not getting that like deep sleep and getting some REM cycle during the night, like your body's not it's not healing, your body isn't processing the hormones, regulating and making the hormones that it needs to perform its natural functions, and to function as it should. um and essentially your body and your mind are not healing if you're not sleeping, essentially. So sleep is massively
Yeah.
important. And I got basically told by my neurologist, like, hey, you're getting older now, and like if you don't start getting regular good sleep, like you could have some neurological issues when you start getting older. So it's something that I have to pay really close attention to, and I take pretty seriously, taking care of myself. So I'm always curious, like what my fellow warriors are doing out there to like manage their bodies and their their body, mind, spirit, essentially. Um,
Yeah.
so shifting gears here,
I think
what
I think just one other thing. One other thing I
yeah,
was thinking of that is also important, um, is drinking, right? So alcohol. Um,
right.
a lot of guys are going to drink alcohol to soothe the pain in our bodies, the pain in our minds, because we have, depending on what you've been through,
Hmm.
you'll have both. And so for me personally, I don't just drink all the time, right? Very rarely do I drink, and I actually weed out a lot of the things that I don't drink. So like hard liquor or what have you, I will do that like in a very rare occasions, right? So not being a casual drinker and not having, just drinking freely, a lot of, again, I think this is something that a lot of vets tend to fall in is heavy drinking, or even, oh, it's just casual drinking. But alcohol actually does affect all of what we just mentioned, is the way we sleep, how much we hydrate, all these different, areas. And not to mention, it becomes a crutch for many of us just to get through the day or to get through the night. And so I think that's another important thing, that if you're not careful with that, that will be a huge, um, yeah, it'll become a huge problem. It has become for some people that I know. And so,
Yeah, when I was younger, I think it was after my second trip to Iraq. It was after Fallujah. Like I was having nightmares. I was hyper vigilant all the time. Um, I was having really bad intrusive thoughts. And to I couldn't sleep. And so I would drink heavily to just go to sleep at night.
hmm,
And then, I'd make stupid decisions sometimes. Like I'd get on my motorcycle and see how fast I could get it going on the freeway, after a half a bottle of Jameson whiskey. I'm lucky to be alive. But
well,
yeah, I can completely identify with that. And nowadays, like I've got enough good healing practice, and it's been, a good, 12 years since I've, had deployed in a combat situation and had anything violent happen. So I've had plenty of time to heal and to, help others heal, and to, get a system in place that helps me, be successful, and can't be stressed enough that, like, yeah, alcohol is a huge problem. And so nowadays, like well, I think I drink like once a week, and I'm at a two drink max. Like, and it's usually with a meal. Like last night, we went out and had dinner, and I had a beer with dinner. And so, um, my rule with that is like no more than two drinks. And I usually try and spread that over. Like I don't do back to back. Like, it's usually like one drink per hour type thing, and then it's capped at two. And then I come home, and when I come home, I will hydrate with whatever I drank, I will drink, if I drank, 2 beers, 2 pints, I'll drink 2 pints of water before I go to sleep. And then when I get up first thing in the morning, I'll down water and then I'll dive into some coffee usually. So that's like
Yeah.
what cause it's just not at my age now. It's not worth it, to, drink heavily anymore. I just pay for it way too bad. I'm not productive. I don't sleep well. I don't cognate well. Like
Yeah.
I have brain fog going on. Like it's not worth it anymore. So I very much have grown out of the whole like partying and drinking really heavily thing. It's like it's not a part of my life anymore. I will still enjoy a drink or two once a week. Sometimes maybe it's, every 2 weeks, but um, I don't imbibe heavily anymore. It's not worth it. So, but yeah, if you're, if for anyone out there that's like, dealing with the whole these kind of issues, like stay away from the bottle as much as possible. I know that's hard. That's a hard thing to do because that's a completely legal coping mechanism. Like it's legal in most places to drink alcohol, so it's right there. It's readily
Yeah.
available. It's everywhere you look. It's part of social fabric in some places, so it's hard. But it goes back to the discipline piece that you were talking about earlier. Like build that discipline to not get heavily intoxicated to deal with things. Like look for other healing modalities to to
Yeah.
work on those things, whether that's prayer, hot and cold, or good diet, good exercise routine, lots of sleep, good nutrition. Don't be eating a bunch of garbage. Go to therapy if you need to, and that having what I've found is like having a multi-layered, all those things that I mentioned, like layering all those up gives you a way better success rate in dealing with
Yeah.
PTSD or dealing with any type of trauma management. It helps having multiple. Like I find that, and I've talked about this a lot on the podcast with like my transition and my dealing with PTS is I find that people will gravitate towards that one thing, and that one thing, like you have to have a multi-layered approach to what you're doing because they will gravitate to that one thing that they do. Like, I know lots of people that will like, they gravitate to their art and they will heavily focus. Like I have this really great friend of mine. She's amazing. She's an absolute amazing artist. I own several pieces of her art, but she's, dealt with a lot of trauma in her life and realistically like hasn't really pursued any other healing practices except for she found art and painting and just buries herself in it. And then, I noticed it and I talked to her about it and really tried to help her as much as I could, and she has grown now into this place where like now she's like very well adjusted, very well grounded, um, does jujitsu now. She's like a blue belt in jujitsu now, which she would have never done when I first met her, and I encouraged her to like go out, do hard things, and she did it, and she's very well adjusted, very well grounded. But I've watched a lot of people like they will bury themselves in the gym or they will bury themselves in an extra, like whatever, their favorite pastime activity is. And that becomes their place where they kind of like go to hide and they become really, really good at those
Mm-hmm.
things. And it is a release or a coping mechanism for them. But I find that people start going there to hide and they still are carrying around a large amount of trauma that is unresolved because they haven't practiced any other ways to manage it or deal with it. Like go to jujitsu all you want and get really, really good at jujitsu, get your black belt. But if you're carrying around a large amount of trauma with you and you drink heavily and in conjunction with going to jujitsu and you don't, um, you drink heavily and you've never gone to therapy, you've never talked to anybody, you don't have any other healing modalities, and that's just that one place that you go to get your angst and your anger out, and then your other coping mechanism is drinking. Like that's not a way to be. So I really, really encourage
Yeah.
anybody that's dealing with trauma to have a multi-layered approach to it and look heavily at your diet, look heavily at your sleep, look heavily at your level of exercise, look at your spiritual, practices, whatever those are, and pursue your healing practices. Live a self-examined life, and I've said that lots. And what I mean by that is look at everything you do, analyze everything you do, just like, and I know for a majority of the civilians out there that listen to this podcast, they don't have military planning experience, but I look at like my healing practices very much as like an op order, like how am I, how am I, how am I going to do it, and why am I doing it, and being very critical of all those things, and having an after action. Kind of after action everything these days. Like, if I had a good session at the gym, awesome, improving sustainment points for that. If I have a business meeting, or like, for example, this podcast, I will be, as soon as I get off of every podcast, I'm like, okay, I look at the conversation arc and I'm like, okay, and I'll listen to my podcast back in post before I put it out, and I'll be like, all right, what did I fail on? What could I have done that was better? What could I have, what questions could I have asked that would have improved the quality of the interview? Like, I AAR everything. I go to the gym, or or not the gym, the range, and I shoot. Like, okay, cool. What drills did I shoot? Improvement sustainment points for that. I look through everything nowadays through an improvement sustainment lens, and so I encourage everybody to like live a more self-examined life and start looking at the why and how you do things. And if you're doing things in your life that you're that are, i.e. drinking too much, that are not serving you well, take a look at that, figure out why you're doing that, and then take actions and steps to fix that. So that's just my 2 cents on how I've transitioned and dealt with my PTS and like and life in general. So I'm always curious when I talk to fellow combat veterans to like crack that open and be like, hey, what are the things that are making you successful in readjusting to and reacclimating to regular life after you hunt down and kill humans for a block of time? Because that is not a normal, that's no way, shape, or form a normal activity or a normal job. We are not, as you have pointed out several times, people like us are not normal humans. So in doing so, we have to have, a healing practice or be living in a way that is not, what normal society is. So I'm always curious, and I love to get different points of view on that topic specifically. So shifting gears a little bit, what is your opinion, or what do you think the state of Israel could do better with managing attacks to prepare their citizenry in the future? Because from what I understand, October 7th, the things that unfolded and happened, just from what I've seen, the footage I've seen, the research I've done, very, very savage and barbaric, the things that happened. And we touched on a little bit of that earlier in the podcast, but being prepared is so fundamentally important, especially when you live in a constant state of, hypervigilance and security because of the nature of, the political and the, oh no, lost him again. Okay. Third time's a charm. We're having all kinds of great tech difficulties. Normally it's on my end. Like this software, I like how it's structured and how it works, specifically for podcasting. But sometimes like we've had audio drop, we've had video files get corrupted. Sometimes it like uploads in HD for a part of it, then drops to like 720p. Like we've had all kinds of interesting problems with the software. So usually it's on my end, but we're getting our butts kicked a little bit by technology with batteries and internet here on this podcast, but it's okay. It's all right. So the question was where we left off before it cut again. The attacks, the scope and nature of the attacks that occurred on October 7th. What do you think about how that's changed the way Israelis look at preparedness, and what do you think is deficient in your current laws or ways that you guys are prepared for these things to happen, and what would you like to see in the future? So kind of a 3-part question there. Like, what would you like to see happen or change to make you guys better prepared?
Well, really, I would say this is something that's actually been an issue that's troubled me for many years, being that to acquire a weapon is very difficult. There are lots of red tape. The funny thing is, it's somebody like me who has a military background or combat military background, does executive protection. I could get a license to do executive protection on a governmental level, but I could not qualify to have a personal carry weapon for many years, up until I think it was 2015 when the laws changed a little bit again, and that was also I think because of a wave of terrorist attacks and whoever was in charge of the internal, I think it's the Ministry of Internal Security or whatever, however it's translated in English. Um, and so they tweaked it, and then someone like me qualified all of a sudden. It's like, yay, I can get my personal carry and have my own weapon and all that. And then what happened on October 7th, it caused that same ministry in the government to tweak the law again and make it more readily available for citizens to be able to qualify to get a weapon. So basically, what I would say is the laws need to keep changing, and they need to be more in favor of the citizen, the normal citizen, to be able to defend themselves. What it used to be is that if you lived what's called beyond the Green Line or somewhere in the West Bank, in Judea, Samaria, in one of those Jewish communities surrounded by basically imminent threat to your life, communities, then you would qualify automatic. If you lived along, like in some areas along the Gaza Strip communities, you would qualify for your personal carry. But if you live in Tel Aviv, or you live in Haifa, or you live where I do in Jerusalem area, you don't qualify for a weapon. And it's like, what? And the only other reason that you would qualify for carrying personal carry is based on your military rank, if you're active reservist and so on. And so that's when I finally qualified, was based on my rank and because of my military service. Otherwise, I wouldn't qualify because I don't live in those high risk, high threat areas in Israel, which is an automatic. And for me, anywhere in Israel, you could get attacked any day by a terrorist. So this thinking that is in the, in the mainstream thought, I guess, of the governmental framework of trying to avoid having too many people armed is really stupid. It's actually negligent, because what I know to be a fact is that every terrorist attack that's taken out in an area that has a high number of armed citizens, then usually it's the citizen that ends the threat before the police or the law enforcement or the military can arrive on the scene of the location of the terrorist attack. So this idea of let's just let the law enforcement handle the case, and if we have too many armed citizens, then you risk the chance of too many people having a negligent discharge and innocent people getting hurt. Like, this is part of the logic and the way people think here. And I'm talking about people in my field, okay, who come from the security world, who come from the military combat world. They hold these ideas that too many guns on the streets is actually a bad thing for them. So I actually have this conversation with them and I disagree with them. I'm like, no, like the opposite. When you have more weapons on the street, and if we stop being afraid of the weapons and afraid of them shooting themselves, okay, because a gun doesn't shoot itself. We all know that, and the only reason why you have accidents is because people don't train. So for me, it's twofold. It's that, number one, the law needs to be tweaked to where any citizen in the state of Israel can arm themselves. And I believe not just in the right to arm yourself, but I believe in the right to, or the responsibility to train yourself to be comparable to operate that weapon. So for example, I like to put it in the category of having a gun license. Very few people are going to, having a car license. Very few people are going to argue that you shouldn't have a car because, the amount of people driving cars these days and this is the, amount of people that get killed on the roads because of car wrecks or someone that runs into a pedestrian, et cetera, right? So if you look at all the deaths related to vehicles and you stack them up, then you're going to see that more people most likely die on the roads than they do from weapons. So why don't we make cars illegal, right? Or why don't we regulate cars in such a way that very few people can own them, right? Because we all want transportation. We all want to get from A to B, and we all want our independence. So nobody wants to have that taken away from them, right? So nobody brings up the debate. But the fact is that you have a high amount of people that die from cars because cars are dangerous and they can kill you if not properly operated and so on and so forth. Well, it's the exact same thing with a gun. There's no real difference to me between those two things. So I think you have to have the right to be able to arm yourself, but you also, just like with a car, you should know how to drive it or know how to shoot it. And therefore, the better you are with that tool, then you're going to be safer with it and you're going to be able to take care of the threat when it occurs. And so that's my personal opinion. And we're fighting very hard actually to arm the first responders with body armor. That's why I do part of my nonprofit is not just helping soldiers, but we also actually help uh, those people who are on the front lines or the first line of defense in the communities around the Gaza Strip, along the Lebanese border, in other parts of Israel that I see, and through my assessing of the high threat of those areas, we try to equip them with body armor and ballistic helmets and so on to help them better carry out their jobs. And my goal is also to help them get trained, because I'm involved with the training community, the weapons instructors, and some of the top people in this industry. I think that's part of the overall package, that if you have people that are trained, they're equipped, and get what they need, then on any future attempt like October 7th, uh, if we're more well prepared, then we can actually eliminate that threat. And the proof is in the pudding, because all the guys who are like me, who do work hard to get their weapons license and do work hard at training, and one of the guys that I know personally who shoots like a machine, he eliminated 2 terrorists that entered his home on the day of the attack. That's one guy I know personally. Another guy that I know personally, he was part of a first responder team that were trained and were very serious about their job. They were like, oh yeah, it's a quiet community. We're all good here. We'll just do a little training. We'll do our thing every year and, whatever. Like, no, these guys were serious. So when they engaged the terrorists, they told me, ran away, whoever survived the attack on their community. Like, they slaughtered those guys. And so that's the reality for me. Like, weapons is not about having a gun because of all the bad ideas that people throw out there in their minds. To me, that's nonsense. A weapon is something of responsibility, and it's something about defense and being able to protect against evil people. And that's our reality here. And it might not be in most people's world that they live in a nice little bubble that they live in, wherever that may be. But that's my reality, and that's my opinion on weapons.
Yeah, we have very much the same kind of controversies here. Where we differ from Israel is like it's enshrined in our governing the Constitution of the United States. The Second Amendment. So we have the right to keep and bear arms. We don't have the civilians don't have depending on what state you live in. I will preface it with that. Depending on what state
Yeah.
or territory you live in, you don't have many, if any, restrictions on what you can have. Like we obviously can't have, we're not allowed to have without proper licensure and reason. Like, and it's mainly if you're a manufacturer that's making weapons for military and law enforcement, you're not allowed to have full auto weapons. But we can primarily have we can have suppressors, we can have lasers, we can have body armor, we can have night vision. And the reason that I find that you know important is because not only that, I mean, it just helps if you're training to a high level. And I always tell people, like, gear is not a substitute for readiness. Like, you have to take those tools, you have to train with them, you have to be educated on them. I grew up, in Wyoming, and I grew up hunting at a very young age, and shot my first gun when I was like 6 or 7 years old. I was a little 22, like breech loader, like lever action, like single shot, and that's what I learned on, and that's how I grew up. And from the time that I was a kid all the way through my military service, like weapons, having firearms has just been a part of my life. And it's, and from what I found, if you educate people properly and you train them properly, it's never an issue. it's the people that I find that like culturally grew up, you know, people from LA and people from New York or people from Boston, Massachusetts, where a lot of firearms are illegal. There's not a big, you know, they live a very urbanized lifestyle. They don't hunt. They, you know, they've never been exposed to firearms, are the ones that are, you know, the loudest proponents for, you know, why we shouldn't have guns, and guns are dangerous and guns are bad. And, um, and so it's, and I've had the opportunity in my life to like educate some of those people, like to come, you know, I've had one of my buddies had this, he was dating this girl for a while and she was just vehemently anti-gun. And I took her out. I finally convinced her, like, I think we made a bet on something. I can't remember exactly what it was. She lost the bet anyway. And my terms for the bet were, you have to go shooting with me. And so I took her out and I, like, you know, gave her, you know, just safety rules, and we did a bunch of dry fire, and like she got to touch it and hold it before I even put bullets in it. And then, you know, we did a couple hours of that, and I, you know, didn't set her up for failure. I had her shoot like a little 22 caliber, um, with
Mm-hmm.
literally virtually no recoil or no loud, you know, pop. And I remember her shooting her first bullet, and she looked at me and she smiled. And I was like, "What are you smiling about? You're
Exactly.
supposed to hate. You're supposed to hate what you're doing right now." And she's like, "Oh, that was
Yeah.
really cool. Can I do it again?" And I was like, "Yeah, do it again." And we sat out there, and she probably shot, I don't know, like 200-300 rounds of 22 through you know, through a rifle, and really really enjoyed it. And then I had her shoot a little 22 pistol and taught her that, and she really enjoyed it. And it completely, that level of exposure and training, and you know, making sure that it was very safety, you know, driven. She and managed properly. She enjoyed it so much that she started really getting into it, and then ended up like, you know, years later buying her own guns, and now shoots regularly and has no problem with guns, and now goes around and tells her friends that
That's
are
funny.
very anti-gun, like, oh no no, you people have it all wrong. So I've had success in converting some
Yeah.
people, but what we see generally in the United States is that the populations
Yeah.
that are very pro Second Amendment and are, you know, are very armed and have a will issue for your concealed permit. Like, we've got a lot of states that have switched over to constitutional carry, which means that if you are not, if you're not a felon, if you have no, you know, if you've never been arrested and convicted of a felony, you are allowed to carry a concealed weapon with no licensure in that state or territory. And a lot of states have switched. A
Right.
lot of states have switched over to that. And what we are finding is that states that have done that, the crime rates and the rates of violence are way way lower than they are in these states that have all this gun control. Like, you know, Chicago, and LA, and you know, Oakland and other parts of the country are, that have this really really hard anti-gun stance. Um, they still have massively huge levels of gun crime and gun violence because there's no responsible armed citizens there. Like, if you're a bad guy, you're going to think twice about fucking around in a community where you know everybody's potentially armed. Like, you're just like, criminals want
Yep.
to go for soft targets. Terrorists want to go for soft targets. So if you're not, you know,
Exactly.
if you're not armed, if they know that that community is not armed or trained appropriately, that's where they're going to go. And that's why you see these states that have will issue with their concealed carry or their constitutional carry. And the general populace is, you look around, everybody's probably carrying a gun. Like, here in Wyoming, we're a bunch of cowboys out here. Everybody's got a gun on them. I guarantee it. Like, I carry every single, and I carry every single day. So, um, and you know,
Yeah.
like, people are not going to mess around out here. They're just not. So, I think that, you know, it's a big mistake to, in especially with your guys' situation, with being completely surrounded on all sides by states that want to wipe your guys' country off the map and murder all your citizens. And it's an agenda for them. I think it's a massive mistake to not have people that are armed and trained properly, civilians, and medically trained, because that's the other piece of it. Like, um,
Yeah.
and I tell people this all the time. I'm like, hey, if you don't believe in guns, and you are anti-gun, and you don't want to touch that, you know, have anything to do with guns, great. What are you doing for your preparedness besides guns? Like, are you medically trained? Have you been through, you know, we call it TCCC, Tactical Combat Casualty Care, which is essentially how to treat and triage people that have suffered from gunshot wounds or fragmentation from explosions, like how to put on a tourniquet, how to treat a tension pneumothorax, how to treat a sucking chest wound, all of that stuff, like how to establish an airway, how to triage people from from routine to priority and urgent medevacing, like all of that stuff, how to put in an IV, how to set up an IV bag and administer it, those type of things. Are you doing that? So it's a I feel like for your guys' particular, and this is just my stupid American opinion, I think that you guys should definitely take a look at in wake of this, and things not getting better, they're continuing to get worse, and there's consistent conflict that just continues to proliferate and get worse and worse and worse. Encourage you guys to really take a hard look at your laws and the ways that you are equipping and training and preparing the citizenry for what happened. Because on October 7th, just from the bits and pieces that I saw and the things that I took a look at and the case studies that I looked at, like, these terrorists swarmed into these areas, these civilian populated areas, and just murdered everybody, and there was nothing that they could do about it, because they were simultaneously not only murdering the populace, but they surgically went after the police stations and the first responders as well simultaneously. And so you've got first responders, you've got military posts, you've got police that are getting swarmed and attacked at the same time civilians are getting attacked. So because you're getting attacked simultaneously, you're not on hand to go help and protect and safeguard the citizenry. The citizenry has to be able to do that on their own, and they have to be autonomous and have a capability to defend themselves. And so I would, I'd encourage, any, I don't know who's going to listen to this, maybe Netanyahu will listen to this podcast. I'd encourage him to like help change the since he's been such a consummate war fighter his whole entire life, to maybe take a look at the laws and the conditions that govern personal security for Israel. And I'm a huge proponent for everybody, to include the state of Israel, has the right to defend itself and has the right to protect its citizenry at all costs and do whatever it takes to do that. And same thing here in America. Like, we have a saying here, like, when bad guys happen, and you need the cops, when seconds matter, cops are only minutes away. And from your experiences and the firefights that you've been in and the things that you've experienced during your career, like, life gets snuffed like that. Like, it takes seconds to kill multiple people. If you know what you're doing, whether it's with a firearm or explosive or even a knife, like, you can do massive amounts of damage in a short period of time if you know what you're doing and you've targeted a soft target properly. So, which is why they do it. So, knowing that, I think, everybody has a responsibility to be prepared. And, we take that very seriously. I teach, firearms, and I, to responsible citizens, and I also train the military and law enforcement as well. And I think it's massively important to have an armed, properly trained and prepared citizenry to deal with criminal stuff and to deal with terrorist attacks. And I think realistically, us as Americans, with our open border that we've had for this whole administration, and like the massive swarming of illegal immigrants that have just come across our southern border, and they've got documented cases of Islamic fundamentalists coming across the border, and they turn them loose, they interview them, and they turn them loose. And there was one gentleman that was interviewed, and he was like, "Oh, I don't need to tell you who I am. Everybody's going to know who I am really soon." Said that on a news camera. And I'm like, that's a guy that's going to either perpetuate a terrorist attack, or he's part of a cell that's going to team together. And, we're going to see, I guarantee you, we're going to reap some very, very nasty repercussions with attacks on our homeland again, because of this open border issue. Like, I know it's going to happen. So I always encourage everybody, like, and if you're constrained, like the citizenry of Israel is in certain locations and locales, to not be equipped with weapons to defend themselves, the bare minimum you can do is like learn how to be a hard target, learn how to employ some, counter surveillance measures at your home, learn how to like fortify your home a little bit with like, some breach proof doors or windows, bar your windows up, bar your doors up, and and also, learn how to fortify your home, and then learn some medical procedures, and, learn how to like treat casualties and keep medical equipment on hand to treat people is, if you don't want to give guns out to everybody, at least give medical equipment out to everybody.
It totally. In fact, one of the attempted attacks on a gentleman, his name's David Stern. If you want to check out, and Google him later online. So he's a, regular Jewish guy, lives out in one of the communities in Samaria, one of the Jewish communities, and he was driving through a town called Hawara, which has had a spike of violence against Jews driving through their village there. And so they killed a brother, two brothers from a community just near where he lives. And I think he was next in line, right? So about a week later, I forget exactly the timeline, but it was just a short period where they just killed his two brothers, and then they tried to kill him and his wife as he was driving through there. So he is very trained with a weapon, but most importantly, because I actually talked to him afterwards and interviewed him, on a personal level, just saying, hey, what did you do? I'd like to know, because that was crazy what happened. So he got shot in the head.
Oh,
okay?
wow.
He self tourniqueted himself after engaging with the terrorist that was fighting, trying to kill him and his wife, engaged with the terrorist, drove away, and then basically self-applied tourniquet and bandaging that he had, and he said, I had practiced that hundreds of times. And I was like, that's spot on, because that's what most of us fail in. Like, we all know how to, make holes, but how many of us know how to plug holes? How many of us know how to stop the bleeding and what have you, what have you? So he says, everywhere I go, I always have a tourniquet on me, on my person, and other medical supplies. And that saved his life. That right there is what saved his life, was the drills, not the making holes drills, but the after action treatment to, the injuries. And that literally saved his life. And so I told him, I said, after that, I'm making sure that I'm taking because I have a kit that I have for security, that we carry everywhere we go. And I'm one of the guys that actually help put together the kit and advocate for have this and this and this and this and this in your kit. Things that most of us here don't really think about. A lot of the first aid, what a first aid thing looks like,
Bleeder
right?
kit,
Those
and
classic.
IFAC, yeah.
No, first aid,
Oh,
right?
you're talking about like the little like boo-boo. We call it a boo-boo kit. That's like got Band-Aids and like,
Thank you.
little tweezers,
right?
and
But yeah. And this is what we hand people and say, here you go. If you're going to go secure a group or whatever, here's a first aid kit. It's like, it's a boo-boo kit. That's like, what am I going to do with that? So I was one of those people that introduced into our community the concept of, no, you have to have a tourniquet. You have to have something to stop the bleeding. Just like we had in the military, that's what, the same thing is in real life, but instead it's like we equip these bodyguards or these security guards that usually will accompany like schools or whatever. It's like, okay, so he has a licensed weapon, so he's the security for that group. But then they'll just as a making a V, here's a first aid kit for you to carry with you. And usually it's also a big bag full of crap, right? Full of gauze and stuff. It's like, what am I going to do with that?
Yeah.
And any case, so that's something that is really pissed me off in the way we do things here and in the way people think here when it comes to, for bandaging and whatever, which is kind of ironic because we actually produce some of the, most advanced trauma kits that you'll find, like things that you guys are using in the States was most likely developed here in Israel, but we don't carry them ourselves.
Well, we have a specific pressure dressing that we call the Israeli pressure dressing.
The Israeli bandage. And Israeli bandage with the piece of plastic.
Yep. It's got the little hook on it, so where you can like wrap it around and tighten it down, and then like wrap it back on itself and lock it down, and it stays. It keeps the pressure locked down super tight, and so we have those, and they work. I've used them on actual casualties, and they work extremely well.
So the Israeli bandage isn't even really used in Israel that much.
It's wild.
except for
It's
combat, like we
right.
all,
Yeah,
so
I usually I encourage everybody to like put together a blowout kit or a bleeder kit, which usually consists of it's usually like I think the one that I have I've got an MPA, which is a nasal pharyngeal airway, which is the nose tube to
yep,
establish airway.
yep,
It's got two rolls of Kerlex in it, which is a compressed gauze for packing wounds. It's got a
yep,
hemostatic agent in it. It's got two chest seals in it for a sucking chest wound, and then it's got a 14 gauge needle to treat tension pneumothorax, which is it's a decompression needle because when you have a perforated lung, your chest cavity will fill up with air. And then also on top of that, then I carry two tourniquets. So we have a fast rule like two is one is none with tourniquets and with
yep,
explosives and all kinds of other stuff. Like we have several rules in life, like two is one is none.
yep,
Magazines, like I always have at least two magazines on me if with my pistol. So
yeah,
yeah, that's having a proper medical kit. Like if you can't do anything, you don't believe in guns, you don't want guns, or you can't have guns, like your medical, like being highly trained in medical and being equipped with a proper medical kit, like. And if you're, in a situation where you're the head of the household, the family, like have a blowout kit or a bleeder kit for literally every single person, and have at least two tourniquets per person to
yep,
treat people in your home. Another force multiplier that I see that's really really great, that's completely overlooked oftentimes by people that don't know any better, for security and for your personal security, essentially, is dogs. I
yep,
trained working
yep,
dogs for a really long time, and like I
yep,
know the value and the power. I've operated with really great dogs. I've seen what dogs can do. You guys utilize
mm-hmm,
them very effectively. A lot of the stuff that we've learned about dogs, we've learned from you guys as well. So, um,
mm-hmm,
dogs work great, and I'm not talking about your fucking your golden labradoodle. I'm talking about like get yourself a proper dog, like get a
yeah,
Mally, or get a Dutch Shepherd or a German Shepherd, a dog whose breed is specifically for protection, and get invest the money and spend them in train them with a reputable trainer, and you will have not only a great protector of your family, but like we call them fur missiles for a reason. So like if your dog is
yep,
trained properly to engage threats properly, I've I have the pleasure of knowing several, really great trainers. Really good friend of mine owns Third Eye Canine, and he's a phenomenal trainer, and he's got dogs. I've spent several times with, several nights with his dogs where they're like loving, friendly, good with kids, completely socialized to any like social environment. And they will snuggle you up just like a regular dog will. But the second there's a threat or you give a specific command prompt, they switch on and it's kill time. And they're completely
yep,
stable. A lot of people get nervous with like, oh, well, I don't want that dog to bite my kids. Well, if the stability of that dog around children is sketchy, that dog hasn't been trained properly or trained by a very good trainer.
exactly,
So like I've worked with and trained dogs that are on a very very high level where they can like sniff bombs, they can track humans, they can find drugs, and they can bite really really well. Um, and if
yeah,
you have a properly trained dog, it's an amazing force multiplier for early warning. They'll alert you, they'll die protecting you or your family. And if they're trained
yep,
properly, they're completely safe to be around small kids and other animals. And the second you give them that command, they're on it. So I always encourage people, if you also live in an environment where you're not allowed to have a firearm, the next best thing is to have a fur missile. Like
$100%.
amazing force multiplier. So have a great dog and be trained in medical if you can't have a gun. So those are my two pieces of advice for people.
I agree with you 100%. That's, do the bare minimum. And again, if you just want to be an easy target and you just want to die quick, don't do any of these things and just live on your life in the nice little bubble that you're living in.
Yeah.
And good luck with that.
Yeah. Good luck. Good luck in your fantasy bubble. The rest of us will be over here training and be highly prepared to
Yeah.
protect you because you're useless.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, this has been a great,
Or at least have a friend like
right,
us. At least have a friend like us. And then that could be, you know, but take good care of them. You know what
right,
I mean? Like maybe pay for their ammo and some of their
right.
training and like, I don't know, something like
Yeah,
that.
right. Or at least bring some chocolate.
So they have an incentive to, so they have an incentive to defend you when they need
Yeah,
to.
yeah. Maybe cook a dinner or two, bring some chocolate chip cookies over once in a while. Yeah, like I
There you
get it.
go. There you go.
Yeah. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. Do you have any like parting thoughts or parting advice for either readiness or like you know, your thoughts or closing thoughts or feelings on the world opinion of like what
Yeah.
Israel is doing to defend itself currently?
Well, no, I mean, really, I think we covered a lot of good ground here. And I just think it's important for people to, when it comes to the Israel issue, um, this isn't sports. It's not like, pick a team and, may the best team win. Nobody's really winning here. Uh, there are losses on both sides. There are wins on both sides of this conflict. The important thing is to understand is that uh, as far as why are we fighting, we're not fighting because we want to, destroy a certain people group. We're literally fighting for our defense. We're fighting for defending our citizens who have been seriously under attack. And just try to better look into this conflict from not one source of media and one mouthpiece or whatever that you're getting that information, and try to look outside of the just that one straw of information, so to speak, and realize it's a little bit more than whatever you might have been misled to or misfed as far as information. When it comes to readiness and preparedness, I think it's and we also talked about mental health and spiritual mind, spirit, body. I think it's important, like what we discussed, that you find a good routine for prayer, meditation, diet, um, sleep, and all those things to be a better, better human being and to enjoy your life and to have a longer, happier life, right? And emotions and all that. And then as far as preparedness and readiness, it's what we discussed here. It's, if you can get a firearm, get it, but don't just buy it and put it in the safe or put it, on you and off of you and like let it collect dust. Use it, train with it. Just like you're driving your car every day, try to shoot your weapon as many times as you can and to train with somebody who knows what they're doing. So find a good, proper firearms instructor or friend that can really help you be efficient with that. And if you're not into guns, get into at least medical and first aid and learn how to stop bleeding from a stab wound or somebody being slashed or even a car accident that happens all around us every day. Anything, an accident at work, some guy cuts off his thumb, I don't know, on a machine, whatever. Whatever it may be, it's going to only better your chances of either applying aid to yourself or to your fellow human being who's around you, or not to mention your family member who might be in a very serious situation. Um, I had the privilege of saving a gentleman's life in the United States who was choking and literally was going to die there because no one else knew what to do. No one else in the restaurant knew what to do. The guy literally was choking on his lunch. And the funny thing is, I always joke about this because I was giving a speech on Israel and whatever, and that local newspaper made this smear against me, like a negative spin on what my attempts were coming to the States, and my connection to the IDF and all this. And I thought how funny if they had heard about the story of how I saved the guy's life. Instead of IDF soldier saves a man's life in our town, it's like, you're this guy, he's this bad guy. And I was just like, yeah, that's real funny. Just me laughing at the irony. But that's the kind of thing that you could have, is literally you could save a person's life and you could be that person between life or death situations, which may occur. It doesn't always have to be terrorist related. It doesn't always have to be something extremely dramatic. It could be simple as somebody choking on their meal. And what do? Would you know what to do?
Or somebody
Most people don't.
treating somebody for hypothermia because they were out fishing and fell through the ice and got all wet and really out in an isolated area where it's a far hike to get to some place that's got heat. So yeah, learning how to, it's not always, you're
Yeah.
correct, it's not always a situation that is, has to do with hyperviolence or terrorists or criminals or anything like that. It could be any number of things. So yeah, I completely
Yeah.
agree with you. Where can people find you, or do you want people to find you?
So if people want to find me, you can find me online. You just can Google my name. I have my Instagram, Facebook. We also do YouTube videos. We educate people about actually the Temple Mount. So you can also look up Cry for Zion. That's my nonprofit work that I do. Um, and yeah, so I mean, really, if people know how to Google and whatnot, you'll find me. I'm out there on the social
Yeah,
world,
out in the social webs.
and yeah, on the social webs.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I can't tell you how much I really enjoyed this conversation, and hope this gives some of the haters out there that have any type of objectivity some pause for thought, some pause for critical thought. I know that's a stretch, but hopefully, hopefully it gives people an ability to stop and think, about the nuance of the situation and how deep and complex it is, and how it's just not as simple as the um, the garbage that we see on mainstream media. So can't tell you how much I appreciated the conversation, and yeah, let's definitely stay in touch. And I will like have you back on. I'd love to have you back on so that we can continue the conversation of readiness and preparedness. And plus, I just want to check in and see how how things are going with you in Israel as this conflict unravels.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. Have a good one, man.